The dust of the Arizona-New Mexico territory had a taste. It was grit and alkali, and the ghosts of 10,000 dry seasons. In the late 1870s, the drought had pressed its thumb on the land until the springs whispered and the creeks turned to dry, cracked veins. Red Arroyo was a town that clung to one of those veins, a frontier settlement that had missed the railroad and was slowly baking in the sun. It sat on the hard edge of the world, staring across the mesas at the lands of the Enda. This was the world Tala had chosen. She stepped down from the coach, the last passenger, and her boots sank into 2 inches of pale dust that felt more like flour. She was a woman from the east, carrying the scent of green hills and damp earth in her memory. But she had come west to be her own person. She was a veterinarian by training, a skill learned from a stubborn old German doctor in Pennsylvania, and an apprentice blacksmith by necessity, a trade learned from her uncle, the uncle who was now dead, leaving her his forge, his anvil, and, as she was about to discover, his troubles. Red Arroyo was not a welcoming place. It was a town holding its breath. The pressure came from the Silver Crown Mining Company, a name spoken in low tones in the saloon and with false brightness in the church. The company was run by a man named Barrett Kane, a man who had never been seen in Red Arroyo but whose shadow fell long and dark. The whispers were of silver, a strike so rich it would bleed the mountains white. The whispers were of the sacred valley. Childa, a place the Yende held as the heart of their world, a place Barrett Kane wanted. Tala pulled her hat down and walked the length of the main street. It was not a long walk. A general store, a saloon, a livery, and the church, at the far end, where the town gave up and the wilderness began, stood the smithy. It was a dark, solid shape against the unforgiving sky. Inside, it smelled of cold iron, old coal, and mice. Her uncle had been dead for 3 months, and the forge was cold. Tala ran a hand over the anvil, a silent greeting. Then she went to the small desk in the corner. The papers were waiting. A letter from the town council, stamped with a seal that looked important. It spoke of her inheritance. It also spoke of back taxes, a sum that made her stomach tighten, and beneath that, another paper, a municipal fee. It was called a safety levy. The numbers were absurd. It was not a welcome. It was a shakedown. She held the papers in her hand, the ink blurring in the dim light. She had come here for independence, and she had walked directly into a new kind of cage, miles away, but under the same relentless sky. Kiona watched his own shadow stretch long in the afternoon light. He had been riding for 2 days, coming home to the village he had left 6 years before. He was Ende, a warrior and a scout. He had worn the blue coat of the cavalry, guiding them through passes and canyons he had known since childhood. He had done it, he told himself, to protect his people, to be a bridge. But the bridge had burned at both ends. His village was nestled in a high, hidden canyon, a place of scarce water and deep roots. As he rode in, the silence was a heavy blanket. Children stopped their play. Women turned their faces away. He had been a scout for the men who now wanted to carve a road through Childa. He was a man of 2 worlds, and he was welcome in neither. His mother met him at the edge of their dwelling. She did not embrace him. She simply looked at him, her eyes holding the same dry sorrow as the land. The weight of his return was a physical thing, a stone in his chest. He had come back to protect his tribe, but he was not sure they wanted his protection. He was not sure he remembered how. The conflict was brewing, as plain as a thunderhead on the horizon. The town council, prodded by the church and the invisible hand of Silver Crown, was talking about a new wagon road, a supply route, a route that would cut straight through the sacred valley. They spoke of progress, of taming the land. They did not speak of the dynamite or the displacement. They did not speak of the graves they would unearth. Tala spent her first day cleaning. She swept out the pack rat nests, oiled the tools, and took inventory. She was a practical woman, and her fear was a cold, hard thing she could set aside, like a tool, to be dealt with later. She was calculating sums in her head, figuring how many horses she would need to shoe, how many plows to mend, just to pay the corrupt fees. Late in the afternoon, she was outside, checking the wood of the heavy stable door, when she heard the horse. It was not the sound of a town horse, shod in heavy iron. This was a lighter, sure step. She looked up. A man was watching her from the edge of the cottonwoods that marked the boundary of her land. He was Ende, and he sat his horse as if he were part of it. The animal, a lean pinto, was favoring its front left hoof. Kiona had seen the smoke from the forge chimney. He had been curious. The old blacksmith was dead. He had not expected to see a woman, especially not a white woman. Her face smudged with soot, her arms bare and muscled like a man's. Tala did not move. She waited. She had been told about the Ende. She had been told they were dangerous. This man did not look dangerous. He looked tired. He dismounted and, leading the horse, he walked toward her. He stopped 10 feet away. He did not speak. He simply gestured to the pinto's hoof. Tala looked at the man, then at the horse. She nodded once. "Bring him in," she said. Her voice was steady. Kiona hesitated. He had not been inside a white person's building in a very long time, not without a rifle pointed at his back, but the pinto was his brother, and he was hurt. He led the horse into the smithy. Tala lit a lantern, the yellow light pushing back the shadows. "Hold his head," she said. It was not a request. She picked up the horse's hoof. Kiona watched her hands. They were strong. They were gentle. She ran her fingers over the frog, her touch firm and knowing. She found it in a moment, a sharp flake of shale, driven deep. "This will sting him," she said, looking up at Kiona. He met her gaze. He nodded. She took a thin, curved knife from her tool roll. She was quick. She was precise. The horse snorted and pulled, but Kiona held him steady, murmuring in the Ende language. Tala worked without pause, her face a mask of concentration. She carved out the stone, cleaned the small, dark wound, and then went to a cabinet. She came back with a tin of thick, dark salve. She worked it into the wound with her thumb. "He will be lame for a day," she said. "Maybe 2, then he will be fine. The hoof is strong." She released the horse's leg and wiped her hands on a piece of greasy burlap. Kiona stood in the quiet. He had expected shouting, or fear. He had not expected this quiet competence. He reached into a pouch at his belt. "No," Tala said. Seeing the gesture, she shook her head. "There is no charge." Kiona paused. He looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the weariness in her eyes, the same weariness he felt in his own bones. He saw the stubborn set of her jaw. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He turned and led the pinto out of the smithy. Tala watched him go. He mounted in a single, fluid motion and disappeared back into the cottonwoods. She stood in the doorway for a long time, the smell of the pine salve on her hands. It was the first human connection she had made in this hard, dry place. It was a small thing, but it was not nothing. She went back inside and looked at the cold forge. She thought about the back taxes, about the mining company, about the whispers. She thought about the man who had trusted her with his horse. The sun went down. The wind picked up, carrying the grit of the abandoned railway line that stopped just outside of town, a monument to failed promises. The desert night fell, and it was cold. It was a cold that got into the bones. Tala lit a fire in the small stove, ate a piece of dry bread, and unfolded the papers from the town council one more time. She would not run. This was her forge now. She would fight for it. The forge was hers, but the fight came faster than she reckoned. 3 days after her arrival, the brittle piece of Red Arroyo shattered. A survey team from the Silver Crown Mining Company, led by a man in a crisp suit an idiot would wear in the desert, decided to ignore the unmarked boundaries and push their tripod-legged equipment into the mouth of Chil Da. They did not go unnoticed. The sacred valley was watched. A group of young Enda boys who had grown into manhood while Kiona was away confronted them. There was shouting. A surveyor pushed one of the young men. The young man pushed back. A rifle was raised, not to fire, but as a threat. It was a foolish, arrogant move. The ND youths were not warriors, not yet, but they were not children. Rocks were thrown. The survey team retreated, dragging their equipment, their dignity shredded. They rode back to Red Arroyo, breathing fire and swearing vengeance. One of the young Ende did not return to the village. He was 17, Kiona's cousin, and he had a gash on his head from a thrown rock, or perhaps a rifle butt. He was more dazed than truly harmed. But he was lost. He stumbled through the night, the world tilting, by sheer chance. He collapsed at dawn not 50 yards from Tala's smithy, near the cottonwoods where Kiona had first appeared. Tala found him when she went to the well for water. He was a boy, dressed in worn buckskin, his black hair matted with dried blood. He was unconscious. For a moment, she froze. She was new here. This was trouble. This was the kind of trouble that could get a person burned out. She looked at his face. He was just a boy. She thought of the veterinary texts she had studied, the diagrams of injuries. She was, after all, a healer. With a grunt, she hauled him to his feet, draping his arm over her shoulder. He was light, all sinew and bone. She got him inside the smithy, onto the cot her uncle had used. A mean, narrow thing of canvas and wood. She cleaned the wound. It was ugly, but not deep. She stitched it with the fine, curved needle she used for delicate work on hounds, her hands steady. She bandaged it with a strip of clean linen torn from her own spare shift. She left a canteen of water by the cot and went back to her forge. She had a set of wagon wheels to repair, and the fire would not wait. The boy woke in the afternoon, his head pounding. He saw the strange woman, her face black with soot, hammering a glowing piece of iron. The sound was deafening, an anvil's ring. He sat up, his hand going to his head. He found the bandage. He looked at the water. He drank, his eyes never leaving her. Tala did not stop her work. She did not look at him. "You were hurt," she said, her voice flat over the ringing of the hammer. "You are not hurt now. When you can walk, you should go. You are not safe here." He understood her tone, if not all the words. He waited another hour, until the sun began to dip and the shadows in the smithy grew long. Then, without a word, he stood up, touched the bandage on his head, and slipped out the back door. He had not been unseen. Mrs. Gable, the preacher's wife, had been passing. She saw the ND boy leave the smithy. She saw Tala standing in the doorway, watching him go. Mrs. Gable drew her shawl tighter, her lips a thin, white line. By evening, the entire town knew. The new blacksmith was harboring savages. The rumors flew, dark and fast. That night, the saloon was full. The survey team, nursing their bruised egos, bought rounds of whiskey and told their story. They had been ambushed. They said, 12 warriors, painted for war. They had been lucky to escape with their lives. And that new woman, one of them slurred, "She's in on it. She patched one of them up, right in her forge." Barrett Kane's invisible hand was at work. The next morning, a new story was on every tongue. A prospector's camp, 10 miles north, had been raided, burned to the ground. Mules stolen. "Into work," the men in the saloon declared. "It is starting again." It was a lie. The camp belonged to Silver Crown. The men who burned it were on Kane's payroll. It was a convenient fire. That afternoon, a man with a tin star visited Tala. He was tall, thin as a rail, with a face that looked like it had been carved from old leather and left in the sun. His eyes were a pale, washed-out blue. This was Sheriff Dawson. He did not get off his horse, just leaned down from the saddle. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was a dry rattle, Sheriff, Tala replied, wiping her hands on her leather apron. I am here on 2 matters, he said, not wasting time. First, I am telling you, for your own good, to stay out of ND affairs. You are new. You do not understand how things are here. I fixed a boy's head. Sheriff, I am a healer. You are a blacksmith, he said. And what you are is a target, which brings me to my second matter. He looked around, as if the dusty street itself might be listening. He lowered his voice. This town council, they are not your friends. Barrett Kane has been buying them. One by one, the taxes, the fees. That is just the start. He wants this land. He wants what is under it. And he is moving to legalize the theft of it. He wants your forge. Why? Tala asked, her stomach cold. It is just a small piece of land. It is the last piece of land on this street that is not owned by the council or the church, and it borders the wagon path to the valley. He wants it all. Be careful, ma'am. That is all I am saying. He tipped his hat, a gesture that was almost polite, and rode away. Tala watched him go. He was a man, she realized, who was trying to be decent in a place that had forgotten the meaning of the word. Dawson's warning was prophetic. The next day, the town council held an emergency meeting. In the wake of the ND raid, they passed a new ordinance, an exclusion order. The Childa Valley and all adjacent lands were now restricted. Any person, white or NDE, found within the exclusion zone without a permit from the council would be arrested for trespassing. And, as a final, vicious clause, any property owned by the trespasser within the bounds of Red Arroyo would be immediately forfeit, seized. Tala read the notice, nailed to the door of the general store. It was a declaration of war. It was a land grab, pure and simple, and it was aimed at both the NDE and at her forge, her land. She was the trespasser they were waiting for. She went back to the smithy, her anger a hot, bright coal in her chest. She found the letter pushed under her door. It was on cheap paper, the words formed in clumsy block letters, as if written with the left hand. It is a bad time to be alone. The NDE are not your friends. Neither is the council. Sell the forge. A fair price will be paid. A man will come tomorrow. Say yes. Tala crumpled the paper in her fist. A fair price? She looked at her anvil. She looked at the cold forge. She would see them in hell. That night, she could not sleep. The wind howled, a lonely, mournful sound. She was alone, and she was afraid, but she was also stubborn. Just before midnight, she heard a sound. Not the wind. A soft footstep outside. Her heart leaped into her throat. She grabbed a heavy iron poker from the forge and stood in the shadows, her knuckles white. A soft knock on the back door. "Blacksmith?" a low voice called. She recognized the voice. It was the Ende man, Kiona. She unbarred the door, holding the poker ready. He stood in the moonlight. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the ground. He was holding a small, empty leather pouch. "My people are sick," he said. His voice was rough. The boy, my cousin. He said you have strong medicine." Tala lowered the poker. "What kind of sickness?" "A fever, in the chest. The children first." "I am a veterinarian," she said, her voice softer. "I heal animals." "He said you were a healer," Kiona insisted. He looked up, and his eyes met hers. She saw a desperation in them that mirrored her own. "He said your hands are good." He held out the small pouch. "We have nothing to trade, only this." He offered a pouch of fever herbs. She knew the plant. The Ende used it for fever. It was good, but it was not strong enough for what he was describing. "Keep it," she said. She turned and went to the large wooden chest her uncle had brought from the east. It held her veterinary supplies. She took out a jar of quinine powder, a bottle of laudanum, and a packet of dried mustard for plasters. She put them in a clean burlap sack. "This is not a gift," she said, handing him the sack. "It is a trade. You will tell me what is happening. The survey team. The burned camp." Kiona's face tightened. "It is not your fight." "They made it my fight," she said, holding up the crumpled letter. "They want my forge." He looked at the letter. Though he could not read the words, he understood the meaning. He took the sack of medicine. "The camp was a lie," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Silver Crown men burned their own camp. To make fear, to make the new law." "The exclusion order," Tala said. He nodded. "They want the valley. They want to break it open." As he spoke, a new sound reached them. The heavy rumble of a wagon, its wheels groaning under a great weight. It was late, far too late for a supply wagon. Like shadows, they moved to the front of the smithy, peering through a crack in the door. A massive freight wagon, drawn by a team of 8 mules, was crawling down the main street. It stopped in front of the Silver Crown office, which was just a small, false-fronted building next to the saloon. The wagon was heavily guarded, 4 men with rifles. Tala could see the cargo, stacked in the wagon bed, covered by a stained canvas, but the canvas had slipped in the moonlight. She could see the wooden crates. She had seen crates like that before, in Pennsylvania, when they were blasting a new quarry. "What is it?" Kiona asked, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. Tala felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. She looked at the crates, at the guards, and at the dark, silent valley beyond the town. "That," she said, her voice as dry as the dust at her feet, "is dynamite, enough to blow the top off a mountain." The dynamite wagon rumbled past, a dark shape of ill omen, and was swallowed by the night. Kiona and Tala stood in the shadows of the smithy, the cold air between them thick with the unsaid. The guards, the rifles, the sheer weight of that cargo. It was a promise of violence, a threat made in wood and black powder. Kiona pulled back from the cracked door. He looked at the burlap sack of medicines in his hand. What he had come for seemed small now, a child's trouble against this new, man-sized shadow. "He will kill the valley," Kiona said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, as simple and as cold as the iron of her anvil. "He will try," Tala said, her voice low. "He will try to blow it open to find his silver." Kiona looked at her, his eyes unreadable in the gloom. "You gave me this," he said, holding up the sack. "But you do not have this medicine." He gestured to the wagon. "Now gone." "That is a sickness for all of us, the fever in the chest. I can fight. This is a poison in the mountain itself." He slipped away without another word, melting back into the night, a shadow among shadows. Tala barred the door, her hands shaking, but not from fear. It was anger, a deep, cold anger that was beginning to burn. The next morning, the town of Red Arroyo woke to Barrett Kane's next move. It was not a wagon of dynamite. It was a piece of paper, nailed to the bulletin board outside the general store. A large, expensive-looking map, drawn with precise, colored inks. It showed the entire territory, from Red Arroyo to the far peaks, and it showed a thick, black square drawn right over the heart of Childa. At the bottom, in flowing, official script. It was titled Registered Mineral Rights of the Silver Crown Mining Corporation. Territorial Grant, 1863. People gathered around it, their voices low and nervous. This was not a rumor. This was law. Tala stood at the back of the small crowd, reading the words. 1863, during the war, when the Army was fighting Confederates and the NDEA and the land was being carved up on paper by men 1,000 miles away. "It looks legal," she heard one man mutter to another. "Looks like he owned it all along." A shadow fell over her. It was Sheriff Dawson. He was not looking at the map. He was looking at her. He motioned with his head. and she followed him away from the crowd, toward the quiet of his small, dusty office. He closed the door. The office held a desk, 2 chairs, and a rifle rack. "That map is a lie," Dawson said, sitting on the edge of his desk and building a sad-looking cigarette. "It looks official," Tala said. "That is the point of a good lie." He licked the paper and sealed it. He did not light it. "I have seen those grants before, during the war. The territorial government was desperate for cash. They sold parcels of land, sight unseen, to raise money for the volunteers. They sold mineral rights, water rights, grazing rights. Most of them were worthless. The paper they were written on cost more than the land they claimed. But this one, Dawson said, claims the valley. Kane has been buying those old, forgotten grants for pennies on the dollar. He finds the families of the men who bought them, men who are long dead, and he makes a show of making good on an old investment. I would wager my star this grant was for a different piece of land altogether, a piece of worthless alkali flat, but the boundaries were written vague. From the red rock to the dry wash. This territory has 1,000 red rocks and 1,000,000 dry washes. Kane just picked the ones he wanted. So it is forged. Tala said, "It is worse than forged." Dawson corrected. "It is a lie wrapped in the truth. The grant is likely real, the land it points to. He changed that. He has a territorial judge in his pocket who will sign off on it, and our local council will back the judge. It is all neat, it is all legal, and it is all theft." He finally lit his cigarette, the smoke filling the small room. "He wants you gone, ma'am, that fee, that tax bill. He is using the law to squeeze you, same as he is using it to squeeze the ND. I cannot prove it. Not yet, but I am telling you to be careful." Tala walked back to the smithy, the sheriff's words echoing in her head, a lie wrapped in the truth. She looked at her uncle's cold forge, at the tools hanging in their proper places. He had been a quiet man. Her uncle, a man of few words. She went to the small, warped desk in the corner. She had looked at the council's tax bill, the absurd levy, but she had not looked at her uncle's own books. She pulled out the heavy, leather-bound ledger. She sat on a stool and opened it. Her uncle's hand was neat, precise. Each job was recorded. Shoeing a mule, 2 bits. Mending a plowshare, 4 bits. The income was small, steady. Then she found the other entries. They started about a year ago. They were not for work. They were under a single heading, protection. The payments were regular. $5 every month, paid to a name she did not recognize. A B. Barlow. She kept turning the pages. The payments continued. And then, 3 months before her uncle's death, they stopped. She found a different entry, a loan, a new page, a new heading, loan for municipal safety fee. The amount was $200. An impossible sum. The interest was listed beneath it, not 10%, not 20%, it was 50%, compounded. She did the figuring in her head. The debt was not $200. With the interest, it was closer to $500. It was a trap, a steel-jawed trap, and her uncle had walked right into it. The council's tax bill was not a new debt. It was the springing of that trap, and her forge was the bait. She slammed the ledger shut, a cloud of dust rising from the cover. He had not died of a bad heart. He had been squeezed to death. Miles away, in the High Canyon village, Kiona delivered the medicine. His mother took the burlap sack, her face betraying nothing. The quinine was a powerful medicine. The children would live. But the village was in a new kind of mourning. The fever was broken, but their spirit was not. Kiona's cousin, the boy Tala had healed, met him as he walked from his mother's dwelling. His face was streaked with ash. "They came," he said, his voice cracking. "While we were watching the surveyors, they came." He led Kiona to the center of the village, the small, willow-framed worship lodge. The place of prayer was torn. The hide coverings were slashed. But that was not the worst of it. Kiona stopped, his heart turning to ice. The altar, a flat stone that had held the offerings, was bare. "The sky bundle," his cousin whispered, his voice choked with shame and rage. "They took it. They touched it." Kiona felt a coldness spread through his veins. The sky bundle was the heart of their lodge, a small, sacred collection of pollen, of turquoise, of feathers, and a piece of stone from the first mountain. It was their connection to the Creator. It was not valuable in the white man's way. It was not gold or silver. It was simply everything. This was not a random act. This was not theft. This was desecration. It was a message. Barrett Kane was not just coming for their land. He was coming for their souls. That night, two shadows moved as one through the chaparral. Kiona had found Tala at her forge. He did not ask. He simply said, "They are moving the dynamite. Now, from the town. I will follow them. You can come, or you can stay." She had not hesitated. She had put on her uncle's heavy canvas coat and followed him to the pinto he had brought for her. They rode without speaking, Kiona leading them on a path that was not a path, through arroyos and over ridges, always keeping the slow, rumbling wagons in their sight, but never in their hearing. The wagons were not going toward the valley. They were turning north, toward the high mesas, toward the head of the river. They left the horses tied in a grove of scrub oak and crept the last half-mile on foot. Kiona moved like smoke, and Tala did her best to copy him, placing her feet in his tracks, breathing through her mouth to make no sound. They found the depot. It was not a building. It was a natural cave, a dark maw in the side of a sandstone cliff. The location was clever. It was hidden. It was dry. And it was directly above the springs, the very source of the Red Arroyo, the headwater for the entire region, for the town and for the ND villages downstream. They watched from a high ledge as the men with rifles unloaded the heavy crates. They stacked them inside the cave. They were laughing and talking, their voices clear in the cold night air. "This is enough to crack the world," one of them said, his voice echoing. "It is enough to start the new river," another replied. And they laughed again. When the last crate was inside, two of the men rolled a massive boulder partially in front of the entrance, and the others covered the tracks with brush. It was a good hiding place. Too good. Tala and Kiona lay flat on the rock, the sandstone cold beneath them, until the wagons were gone. The silence that returned was heavy, terrible. They made their way back to the horses, the moon painting their path in shades of silver and black. They did not speak until they were miles away, in a small, sheltered box canyon. Kiona stared into the darkness, his face a mask of stone. "I know men," he said, his voice so low Tala had to strain to hear him. "At Fort Wingate, men in the cavalry. I was their scout. I could send word. They have the wire. They could stop this." "Why do you not?" Tala asked, her own voice quiet. He turned to look at her. The moonlight caught the anger and the agony in his eyes. "If I go to the blue coats, I am a traitor. To my people. The blue coat is the same as Kane's coat. They will not see the difference. If I go to them, I am a dead man to my family. I will have no people, no home." He looked away, back at the dark cliffs. "But if I do nothing, Childa, the water, all of it, will be poison. It will all be gone." Tala felt the bite of his trap. It was the same as hers. She was caught by a ledger and a forged tax bill. He was caught between his people and his past. "We will drown in their rumors. Kiona," she said, her voice finding a strength she did not know she had. "They have maps, they have laws, they have judges. We have the truth. But it is not enough. We need evidence. We need something a white man's court cannot ignore." She took a breath. "I heard of a man in Willow Pass, 2 days' ride from here. My uncle spoke of him. A retired territorial ranger, a man who knows these lands, a man who—" My uncle said, could not be bought. He could look at that map and know it is a lie. He could testify. Kiona looked at her, a spark of interest in his eyes. One old man against Cain, against the council. He is not enough, Tala admitted. We need more. That dynamite. The men who moved it. They are not miners. They are freight haulers. They will have papers. Papers? A shipping ledger, Tala said. A manifest. It will say where the dynamite came from. It will say who paid for it. It will say where it was going. It will be signed. It is the proof. It is the weapon. Kiona. The plan formed in his eyes before she even finished. He saw it. A piece of paper. Not a map. Not a treaty. A bill. A receipt for a crime. The cave, he said. It will be there. With the guards. There will be guards, Tala agreed, her heart hammering. But they are guarding dynamite, not a piece of paper. And I can open a lock. My uncle, he taught me. I am a blacksmith. And you can move without sound. He held her gaze for a long time. She did not look away. This was it. This was the moment the world shifted. She was a veterinarian from the East. He was a scout who had lost his way. And together, they were something else. They will be asleep, Kiona said. But one will be awake. Always. Then you will have to be quieter than always, Tala said. A small, thin smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was a grim, tired smile. But it was a smile. We will go tonight, he said. Tala nodded, the cold night air feeling sharp in her lungs. Tonight. They did not ride back to town. They did not speak of the ranger in Willow Pass. The time for that was gone. The time for talk was over. Kiona's plan was made in silence, and Tala's agreement was a grim nod in the thin moonlight. They rested the horses for an hour in the box canyon, letting them drink from a small, hidden seep Kiona knew. They ate a handful of dried meat from his pouch. It was hard and tasteless, but it was fuel. Tala had come prepared for a different kind of work. In the deep pockets of her uncle's coat, she carried a small roll of canvas. Inside were not a veterinarian's tools, but the slender, hard-tempered steel picks, the thin-bladed tension wrenches, and the small, precise files that were the secret art of the locksmith. Her uncle had been a master, and he had taught her that opening a lock was not about force. It was about listening. It was about feeling the tumblers fall, one by one, like notes in a song. They left the horses tied deep in a thicket of manzanita, a mile from the cave. The rest of the way was on foot, up the steep, crumbling sandstone. Kiona went first. He was not a man walking. He was a shadow detaching itself from other shadows. He was a breath of wind that made no sound. Tala, her boots loud and clumsy in her own ears, felt like a wagon clattering behind him. But she did as he had shown her. She placed her feet where he had placed his, on solid rock, avoiding the loose gravel. She kept her weight low, her hands off the brush that would whisper. They reached the high ledge above the cave. The moon was higher now, casting a cruel, bright light. Below them, two men sat by a small, smokeless fire of juniper wood. The boulder had been rolled back, leaving the entrance to the cave, a dark, gaping mouth, partially open. One man was awake, holding a rifle across his knees. The other was slumped against a crate, his hat over his eyes, his breathing a low, wet snore. Expand. He was waiting. Tala felt her heart hammering against her ribs, a drumbeat that must be audible for miles. Kiona touched her arm. It was not a comfort. It was a command. Stay. He vanished. Tala blinked, and he was gone. She scanned the rocks below. Nothing. He had simply been absorbed by the night. The man with the rifle, a heavy-bearded man in a stained Union suit, stood up. He stretched, his joints popping in the quiet. He walked a few paces from the fire, turned his back, and relieved himself against the cliff wall. A small stone, no bigger than a bird's egg, suddenly clattered down the cliff face, 50 yards to the left of the cave. The bearded man froze. He spun around, pulling his rifle up. "Barlow!" he hissed at the sleeping man. "Wake up, you damn drunk!" The man named Barlow snorted and waved a hand. "Someone's out there," the bearded man whispered. He stared into the darkness where the pebble had fallen. He took a few steps in that direction, his rifle raised, his eyes narrowed. Tala saw a flicker of movement near the cave mouth. Kiona. He was already there. He had used the sound, the diversion, to cross the open space in a single, silent rush. He was pressed against the cliff, just inside the shadow of the entrance. He signaled to her, a wave of his hand. Now. Her turn. Tala rose, her body aching with tension, and slid down the smooth rock face, her boots landing with a soft thud on the sandy ground. The bearded man's back was still to her. Barlow was still snoring. She moved in a low crouch, the 20 feet to the cave entrance feeling like a mile. She slipped inside, her eyes blind in the absolute darkness. She felt Kiona's hand on her, pulling her deeper, behind the stack of dynamite crates. "There," he whispered, his breath hot on her ear. His hand guided hers, not to the crates, to a small, tin-plated strongbox, sitting on a flat rock just inside the cave. It had a heavy brass padlock. Tala knelt. She pulled the canvas roll from her pocket and selected a wrench and a pick. She slid the tension wrench into the keyhole and applied the slightest pressure. She inserted the pick. She began to feel it was a good lock, 6 pins. She heard the bearded man curse out in the darkness. "Nothing," he growled. "Just a damn pack rat." She heard him walking back. His heavy boots crunched on the gravel. He was coming toward the cave. Tala's hands were sweating. The pick slipped. She cursed silently, took a breath, and started again. 1, 2, 3. She felt the pins lift. Small, satisfying clicks. 4, 5. The man's footsteps stopped, right at the cave entrance. He was standing in the moonlight, a dark silhouette against the fire. Kiona tensed beside her. She felt, rather than saw, him draw his knife. The man sniffed. "Smells like hell. Barlow, you set the damn dynamite on fire." Barlow snorted awake. "What, who shut up? I am sleepin'." The bearded man grunted, unconvinced, but he did not come in. He turned and kicked Barlow's boot. "Your watch. I'm getting coffee." He walked back to the fire and picked up a tin pot. 6. The last pin clicked. The lock's core turned under the pressure of her wrench. Tala pulled the hasp open. She lifted the lid. Inside, lit by a thin sliver of moonlight from the entrance, was a single, leather-bound shipping ledger, and beneath it, a rolled sheaf of papers. She took them both. She tucked them inside her coat. She closed the box and clicked the padlock shut. "Go," Kiona whispered. She went first, slipping back out of the cave. Barlow was now the man on watch, his head sunk on his chest, already half asleep again. The bearded man was at the fire, his back to them, pouring coffee. Tala was halfway to the rocks when her boot, worn slick on the sole, slipped on a patch of smooth stone. She did not fall, but she dislodged a handful of gravel that skittered down the path. Barlow's head snapped up. "Who is there?" he yelled, his voice thick with sleep and whiskey. He saw her, a woman's shape, scrambling for the rocks. He grabbed his rifle and fired. The shot was deafening. The bullet sparked off the stone, a foot from Tala's head. Kiona was on him. He had come from the other side, a blur of motion. He did not use his knife. He used the butt of it, a heavy, brutal blow to the side of Barlow's head. The man collapsed without a sound. The bearded man spun around, dropping his coffee. He saw Barlow fall. He saw Kiona. He saw Tala. He brought his rifle up and fired. Not at Kiona, but at Tala. She felt it. A white-hot poker, driven through her left shoulder. The force of it spun her around. and she fell hard, her head cracking against the rock. For a second, the world went black, filled with stars. Kiona roared. It was not a human sound. It was a sound of pure, animal rage. He did not run from the rifle. He ran at it. He grabbed the hot barrel and wrenched it, pointing it at the sky. The man fired again, the blast charring Kiona's hand. Kiona ignored it. He drove his knife, not the blade, but the heavy pommel, into the man's throat. The man gagged, his eyes wide, and fell, clutching his neck, his rifle clattering on the stones. Kiona was at Tala's side in an instant. He hauled her to her feet. "Can you run?" I think so," she gasped. The pain was a living thing, a fire in her arm. Her coat was already soaked and warm. "Run," he ordered. And they ran as the man on the ground choked and gasped for air. They ran, Kiona half dragging her, back up the trail, toward the thicket where they had left the horses. They heard a shout from behind them. Barlow. He was on his feet. Another shot, wild this time, echoed through the night. They were in a narrow, steep-sided wash, a shortcut Kiona had chosen. The walls were all loose shale and crumbling sandstone. Barlow was behind them, gaining. He was uninjured, and he knew the terrain. "Here!" Kiona panted. He shoved Tala into a narrow cleft, a space between two massive boulders. He looked up. Above them, balanced precariously on the canyon rim, was a dead, bleached pine tree, its roots holding a mass of rock and scree. "Stay," he commanded. He began to climb. He moved up the sheer rock face like a spider, his hands and feet finding holds that were not there. Tala watched, her breath coming in sobs, her shoulder on fire. Barlow rounded the corner. He saw her. He stopped, not 20 yards away. He grinned, his teeth yellow in the moonlight. He raised his rifle, taking his time. "Now you pay," he snarled. Kiona, he was at the top. He put his shoulder to the dead pine and heaved. The sound was a low groan, then a sharp crack. The entire mass of rock, and the tree with it, tore loose. It was not a quiet trap. It was an avalanche. Barlow looked up. His eyes went wide with terror. He did not even have time to scream. The world fell on him. Rocks and dirt, and the heavy, splintered trunk of the pine tree. The canyon filled with dust, so thick it choked the moonlight. Tala coughed, her hand over her mouth. When the dust settled, the path was gone. Barlow was gone. There was only a 10-foot-high wall of rock. Kiona dropped from a ledge, landing silently at her side. He looked at the rock slide. He looked at her. He offered her his good hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. They did not speak. They did not look back. They went to the horses and they rode. They rode as if hell was behind them. And it was almost dawn when they reached Red Arroyo. They did not ride in together. Kiona left her at the edge of the cottonwoods. He gave her the reins to her horse, his face grim. "The medicine," he said. "It is inside, the ledger, the map." She was swaying in the saddle, her arm a dead, heavy weight. "Good," he said. He looked at her shoulder, at the dark stain that had spread all the way to her waist. "You are a strong woman, blacksmith, but you bleed like any other." He turned the pinto and was gone. Tala slid from the saddle, nearly falling. She stumbled into the smithy, barred the door, and collapsed on the dirt floor. She lay there for a long time, the ledger and the map still tucked inside her coat, a hard, square promise against her ribs. She gritted her teeth, pulled the coat off, and then her shirt. The wound was high on her shoulder, a deep, raw graze that had torn the muscle. It was bleeding, but it was not an artery. She was a veterinarian. She knew. She cleaned it with whiskey, her gasp of pain muffled by a piece of leather she bit down on. She stitched it herself, her right hand clumsy but sure, her left arm useless. She bandaged it with strips of linen. Then she sat at her uncle's desk, shaking with shock and cold, and she opened the ledger. She did not need to read it. The first page told the story. A manifest, signed by a man from the Silver Crown office, for oil drilling supplies. But the freight charges, the weight, the cost, it was all there. It was dynamite. And the second document was a map. Not a surveyor's map. It was a blasting map. It showed a series of charges drilled into the cliffs at the head of the springs that fed the entire region. They were not just going to mine the valley. They were going to blow the springs to cut off the water, to drive the ND out, and the town with them. She waited until the sun was fully up. She put her uncle's clean shirt on, wincing as she pulled it over the bandage. She put the papers inside her bodice, and she walked to the sheriff's office. Dawson was there. He looked up, his face gaunt. "Ma'am, you look like you have seen a ghost." "I have seen worse," she said. She pulled the papers out and laid them on his desk. The ledger, the map. He looked at them. He read the manifest. He unrolled the map. His face turned the color of ash. He did not ask her how she got them. He did not ask about the blood on her collar. He just looked at them, and a slow, cold anger came into his pale eyes. "Judge Hadley," he said, his voice a rasp. "He is 2 days south, in Tucson. I will send a wire. I will tell him it is a matter of life and death. He will come." He looked at her. "You have done a brave thing, ma'am. A damn brave, fool thing." "Will it be enough?" she asked. "It is a start," he said. He folded the papers carefully. "It is a real start." He walked her to the door. He looked out at the sunny street, at the false fronts of the buildings. "But you should know," he said, his voice low. "The council, they did not wait. They had a meeting last night." Tala felt a new, cold dread. "What?" "They have pre-signed a lien for your uncle's back taxes, the ones he was encouraged to take on." He would not meet her eyes. "Tala, they are seizing the forge. They gave you 72 hours, 3 days. Then they take it." She stared at him, the wound in her shoulder, the stolen valley, the dynamite at the springs. And now this, a piece of paper, a legal, quiet knife in the back. She felt a wave of dizziness. She could run. She could ride to Willow Pass, find the ranger, disappear. She could leave this all behind. Dawson saw the struggle in her face. He put a hand on her good arm. "Ma'am?" She shook her head. She looked past him, at her forge, its dark shape solid at the end of the street. It was her uncle's. It was hers. "No," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I am not running. I am a blacksmith. I will stand my ground." Kiona returned to his village. The news of his night's work was written on his face, in the powder burns on his hand, and in the grim set of his jaw. He called the elders and the young men to a council. He laid it out, the dynamite, the plan to poison the springs, the woman, the blacksmith, who had bled to get the proof. There was silence. Then a young warrior, the same one who had been at the confrontation with the surveyors, stood up. His name was Taza. "A white woman," he spat. "You trust her. You fight with her. She is one of them. They are all liars. They all want to steal. You have been a white man's dog for too long. Kiona, you have forgotten." The insult hung in the air. Kiona did not move. Then his mother stood. She was an old woman, but her back was straight. She looked at Taza, and her eyes were sharp. "This woman," she said, her voice clear and strong, "healed my sister's son. She did not ask for payment. She gave this one." She pointed at Kiona. "Medicine for our children. He says she bled for us last night. I have seen the white men. I know their greed. But I am looking at my son. He has returned. He trusts her. I will trust his eyes." She sat. The argument was not over, but the tide had turned. Kiona stood. He looked at Taza. He looked at the elders. I will protect this valley, he said, his voice quiet but carrying in the cold morning air. I will protect our people, and I will protect the blacksmith. She is not a white woman. She is an ally. I have given my word. I will stand between you and her. I will stand between all of us and Cain. I am trapped there, and that is where I will make my fight. Barrett Cain did not wait for the law. He had other, older weapons. He had fear, and he had God. The Sunday after Tala delivered the evidence to Sheriff Dawson, the sermon at the Red Arroyo Church was a thing of fire and brimstone. The preacher, a man named Hobbs, was a thin, pale man with a voice like a trumpet. He had been a guest at Cain's distant ranch. He had eaten Cain's food and drunk his whiskey. He was a bought man, and he delivered the sermon he had been paid for. He did not name Tala. He did not need to. He spoke of new arrivals who did not respect the order of things. He spoke of disruptors who consorted with savages, who worked against the good, God-fearing men trying to bring prosperity to the territory. He spoke of the town's charter, of progress, of the divine right of men to tame the wilderness. There are those among us, he thundered, his face red, who would stand with the heathen, who would work in darkness, who would bring chaos and bloodshed to our streets in the name of their own selfish pride. They are a sickness, a poison, and they must be cast out. The people listened. Mrs. Gable nodded, her eyes closed in fervent agreement. The men from the saloon, the ones on Silver Crown's payroll, grunted amen. The ordinary people, the ones just trying to survive the drought. They looked at the floor. They were afraid. The sermon gave their fear a name, and it gave it a face. When Tala walked to the general store later that day, people moved aside. They would not meet her eyes. She was an outcast. The lien on her forge was now common knowledge. 72 hours. She had 2 days left. The clock was ticking. Cain's sermon was a public attack. His next was a private one, and far more vicious. It was the night of the town's founding day fair. It was a small, sad affair. A few lanterns strung between the saloon and the general store. A fiddler playing badly out of tune. A wheel of fortune. Likely rigged. But it was a break from the dust and the fear. The whole town was there, such as it was. Kiona's cousin, the boy Tala had healed, had a dangerous curiosity. He had heard the music from the edge of town, and he had crept close, hiding in the shadows of the livery, just to watch the strange, loud spectacle. He had never seen so many white people in one place. He did not see the man who had been watching him. The man had been waiting in those same shadows. He was a big man, and he moved with a new, pronounced limp. His face was a roadmap of fresh, purple scars, as if he had been clawed by a cat or scraped against a mile of sandstone. His arm was in a sling, but his other arm, his right arm, was fine. It was strong. It was Barlow. He had clawed his way out of that rock slide, a miracle of pure, undirected malice. He had spent a day and a night digging, his rage a furnace against the pain. He was a man buried alive, and he had come back. He wanted revenge. He wanted the ND scout, and he wanted the blacksmith. He grabbed the boy from behind, a big scarred hand clamped over his mouth. He did not make a sound. He dragged the boy, all wiry muscle and sudden terror, back into the darkness, toward the abandoned coal depot at the edge of the defunct railway line. An hour later, a small, dirty piece of paper was slipped under the door of the smithy. Tala, her shoulder aching, was cleaning her tools, unable to sleep. She saw the paper. She picked it up. The words were crude, written in charcoal. I have the ND boy, the one you like. He is at the old coal shed. Come alone, or he dies. Tala's blood went cold. She looked at the door. She looked at her forge. She thought of the boy's face, of the stitches she had put in his head. She grabbed her uncle's coat. She did not hesitate. She did not think to get Dawson. This was a bill, and it was addressed to her. She was almost at the door when it opened. Kiona stood there. He had not knocked. He held up a single, small moccasin. He had found it in the dust near the livery. He had been tracking his cousin for an hour. "He is gone," Kiona said. His voice was flat. "Dead." Tala held out the note. Kiona read it, or rather, he understood the shape of the words. "Cole, boy, die." He looked at her, his face a mask of such cold fury that she took a step back. "He wants me," Tala said, her voice shaking but firm. "It is a trade. Barlow, the man from the cave. He wants me, not the boy. I will go. I will trade myself. Then you and Dawson can—" "No," Kiona cut her off. The word was absolute. "He will kill the boy. Then he will kill you. This is not a trade. It is an execution. But we cannot." "We," Kiona said. He nodded. "Once. Yes, we." He went to the door and looked out at the false, flickering light of the fair. "Dawson, get him. He has a rifle. I have a knife. You have— what do you have?" "I am a blacksmith," Tala said. She looked around. She grabbed a heavy 20-inch steel pry bar, tempered to cracked stone. "I have this." "Good," Kiona said. "Get Dawson. Meet me at the tracks. Do not be seen." They found Dawson near the fiddler's stand, his eyes scanning the crowd. He was on edge. He knew this much celebration was a good time for trouble. Tala pulled him aside, into the alley. She spoke in a low, urgent whisper. "Barlow, he is alive. He has Kiona's cousin at the coal depot." Dawson did not waste time with questions. He had seen too much. Alive after that. "Alive and angry," Tala said. "He wants a trade. For her," Kiona said, stepping from the shadows. Dawson looked at Kiona, then at Tala. He had the ledger. He had the map. He was waiting for the judge. This was the last thing he needed. "It is a trap," Dawson said. "We know," Kiona replied. "This is not official business. Kiona, I cannot deputize you." "I am not asking for a star," Kiona said. "I am asking for my cousin." Dawson sighed, a long, weary breath. He looked at Tala, at her set jaw, at the pry bar in her hand. He nodded. "All right, here is how we do it. I will go to the front. I will talk to him. I am the law. He will have to talk. You two? That depot has the old inspection tunnels, from the railway days. They come up from the creek bed. Kiona, you know them." Kiona nodded. "I know them. You go in the back. You find the boy. When you have him, you get him out. I will keep Barlow talking. We do this quiet, no heroes." The coal depot was a place of ghosts. It was a long, low building, black with soot, its windows broken. A single lantern burned inside, casting huge, monstrous shadows. Dawson walked into the circle of light, his hands empty, held away from his sides. "Barlow," he called. "This is Sheriff Dawson. I am here to talk." There was a silence. Then a voice from the darkness. "Talking's done. Sheriff, I got the boy. You tell the blacksmith to come out, or I will start cutting this kid." "She is not here, Barlow. It is just me. Let the boy go. We can talk about the rock slide. That was an accident." A harsh laugh echoed from the depot. "Accident! That scout buried me, and the bitch! She shot me, I am owed." "She did not shoot you," Dawson said, taking a slow step closer. "That was me, at the cave. You are confused." "I am not confused," Barlow roared. "I want her." While Dawson talked, Tala and Kiona were in the creek bed. The tunnel was a low, square hole, choked with weeds. It smelled of rust and cold, damp earth. Kiona. Tala had her own small lantern, a smith's light, but Kiona put his hand over it. "No," he whispered. "I can see." She could not. She was blind. She put her hand on his back, on the warm, solid muscle, and let him lead her. He moved with a confidence that was absolute. He was a creature of this darkness. She followed the sound of his breathing, the soft scrape of his moccasins. They moved for what felt like an hour. The tunnel sloped up. They climbed a rusted iron ladder. Kiona pushed open a wooden trapdoor, a fraction of an inch. They were inside. They were on a raised platform, behind a line of old, overturned coal cars. Below them, in the main depot, Tala could see the scene. Barlow was there, his face demonic in the lantern light. He was standing near a stack of old timbers. He held Kiona's cousin, the boy's arms pinned behind him. He had a knife to the boy's throat. And he was not alone. The bearded man, the one Kiona had struck in the throat, was there. He was sitting on a crate, his throat wrapped in a bloody bandage, a shotgun across his knees. He looked sick, but he was awake. This was not a rescue. It was an ambush. "He has 2 men, Tala whispered, her heart sinking. "1, Kiona whispered back. "The other is half dead. He is the danger." He pointed at Barlow. "Dawson," Tala began. "He will see," Kiona said. They heard Dawson's voice, louder now. "All right, Barlow, I am coming in, hands empty." Dawson stepped into the doorway. The man with the shotgun lifted his weapon. Dawson stopped. "See?" Barlow grinned, his scarred face splitting. "We got a party. Now, where is the bitch?" "She is at her forge," Dawson said, his voice level. "She is waiting for the judge. You are finished, Barlow. Kane is done." "Kane," Barlow spat. "This ain't for Kane. This is for me. This is for what you did to me." He looked at the bearded man. "Watch the sheriff." He began to drag the boy toward a dark opening in the floor, a shaft leading down to the lower mine tunnels. "We are going to go where no one can find us, and the boy is going to scream." "No," Kiona said. It was not a whisper. It was a command. He stood up. Barlow froze. He saw Kiona, 20 yards away, on the platform. His eyes went wide, and then he smiled. A true, happy smile. "You," he breathed. "You came. Good." He shoved the boy forward and raised a pistol, a big Colt Army revolver. "Now," Dawson yelled. Dawson drew his own pistol and fired at the man with the shotgun. The man fired back, the blast filling the depot with smoke and thunder. Dawson ducked behind the doorframe. Kiona threw his knife. He was not aiming for Barlow. He was aiming for the lantern. The knife struck the tin, and the depot was plunged into absolute darkness. Tala heard a scream, a yell, the sound of the shotgun firing again, its blast a blind, orange flower in the dark. "Tala," Kiona's voice, right next to her. "The boy, I have him." He had moved in the instant the light went out. He had crossed the platform, grabbed his cousin, and dived back behind the coal cars. "Get him out!" Kiona yelled. "Through the tunnel, go!" "What about you?" she cried, her hands on the terrified, trembling boy. "Dawson is trapped, go." He was gone, leaping from the platform into the smoke-filled blackness. Tala pulled the boy, who was crying now, toward the trapdoor. "Down," she commanded. "Down the ladder." She heard a crash, a man's grunt of pain. "Kiona." She heard Dawson's voice. "Barlow, give it up." Then she heard a new sound, a hiss, and she smelled it. Sulfur. Fuse. "No," Barlow's voice cackled from the darkness. "You buried me. I will bury you." "Kiona," Tala screamed. "He has a fuse. It is a bomb." She shoved the boy down the ladder. "Run! Do not stop!" She turned back. She could not leave them. She ran to the edge of the platform, the pry bar in her hand. "Kiona!" A small flame sputtered to life near the mine shaft. Barlow. He was holding a stick of dynamite. Its fuse lit. He was holding it over the shaft. "This whole place is wired," he laughed, his voice breaking. "The whole depot, left over from the railway. A little goodbye from Silver Crown." Dawson fired. The shot hit Barlow in the arm. the arm holding the pistol. He cried out, his pistol clattering away. But he was still holding the dynamite, and he was standing next to the shaft. Kiona burst from the smoke. He tackled Barlow, a full, running tackle that sent both men sliding across the floor. The stick of dynamite flew from Barlow's hand. It spun through the air, a small, hissing comet, and fell. It fell right into the open mine shaft. Tala saw it. Kiona saw it. "Run!" Kiona yelled at Dawson. He grabbed Tala's hand as she leaped from the platform. He did not run for the front door. He ran for the side wall, a place where the timbers were rotten. The explosion was not a bang. It was a roar. It was the sound of the earth itself splitting open. The floor beneath them heaved. The main support beams, weakened by Barlow's charge, snapped like twigs. The roof of the coal depot, tons of timber and slate and coal dust, came down. Tala did not see it. She was pulled forward by Kiona, who shoved her through the splintering side wall just as the main roof collapsed. They fell, rolling, into the dust and the night, landing hard in the creek bed. The world collapsed behind them. They lay there, gasping, their ears ringing. The entire coal depot was a mountain of rubble. "Dawson!" Tala choked, pushing herself up. "Dawson!" A groan from the front, from near the doorway. A hand was sticking out from under a pile of lighter debris, the door frame, which had partially held. They ran, they dug, their hands raw, pulling at the splintered wood. They found him. He was alive. His leg was pinned, and his head was bleeding, but he was alive. The man with the shotgun was not. He was buried. Barlow was buried. My leg!" Dawson gasped, his face white with pain. Tala looked. "It is pinned. Kiona, the pry bar." She had dropped it. She had dropped it inside. "It is broken," Kiona said, looking at the angle of the trapped limb. "We need—" Tala looked around, frantic. She saw a heavy timber, a piece of the track support. "There, together." They put their shoulders to it. They used it as a lever. Tala felt her wounded shoulder scream, a new, sharp agony, but she ignored it. They strained, their boots slipping in the dust. The beam over Dawson's leg shifted, an inch. "Again," Tala gasped. They heaved. The beam lifted. Dawson screamed as he pulled his leg free. It was a ruin of cloth and blood. They dragged him clear, just as the rest of the pile settled with a groan. They were alive, the three of them, alive, and covered in filth, and standing in a graveyard. Kiona's cousin ran to him, throwing his arms around his waist. Kiona put a hand on his head, his face rigid. "It is over," Tala said, breathing in the sulphurous air. "No," Dawson said, gritting his teeth as Kiona and Tala made a rough bandage. "It is not. Look." A man was riding toward them, riding hard from the town. He was waving his hat. It was the telegraph operator. "Sheriff," he yelled, his voice high and panicked. "Sheriff Dawson, I got a message. The wire. It is from Tucson Judge Hadley. His wagon broke down, but he got a new one. He is here. He is in town. He said he is opening a special hearing at sunrise first light." Tala and Kiona looked at each other. The dust, the blood, the ringing in their ears. Sunrise. That was 3 hours. Dawson, his face pale, looked up at them. "Well, it is now or never." Tala looked at the smoking ruins. She looked at Dawson's broken leg. She looked at Kiona, his face a mask of coal dust and grim determination. "We will be there." Tala said. She pulled the blasting map, still tucked in her bodice, now torn and stained. She pulled out her uncle's ledger, the one with the dirty lien. "We will be there. We will show him the dynamite. We will show him the lien. We will show him everything." The hours before dawn were a cold, gray purgatory. They had carried Dawson back to his office, laying him on his cot. the sheriff gritting his teeth as Tala and Kiona set the splintered bone of his leg as best they could. The man was in agony, but his eyes were clear. "You have to wash," he had rasped, looking at them. They were caked in filth, coal dust, sulfur, mud, and the dried blood from Tala's shoulder wound, which had torn open again. "You cannot go before a judge looking like you lost a war." "We did lose one," Tala had said, her voice hollow. "The day is not over." Dawson said, "Kiona, there is a clean spring north of the livery, the one the horses will not drink from. Too cold. Go, both of you. Clean the depot off you, put on clean clothes, and be in that saloon at sunrise. Do not be late." Kiona had nodded. He took Tala by her good arm. She was moving like a woman in a dream, her body a single, dull instrument of pain. He led her away from the town, into the scrubland, as the first pale light began to bruise the eastern sky. The spring was where Dawson said it was a deep, still pool, fed from the rock, and it was shockingly cold. The moon, a white sliver, was still high, and it cast a bright, clean light on the water. Kiona stopped. "I will be upstream," he said. "Call if you need." He turned and walked up the small creek, disappearing into the willows. Tala stood alone by the pool. She was shaking, from cold, from shock, from an exhaustion so deep it felt like death. She looked at her hands, black with soot and another man's blood. She looked at her uncle's coat, torn and ruined. She peeled the layers of stiff, foul-smelling cloth from her body. The bandage on her shoulder was a black rag. She undid it, her fingers clumsy, and let it fall. She looked at the raw, torn muscle, inflamed and angry. She was a ruin. She stepped into the water. The cold was a physical blow. It stole her breath. She gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. She forced herself deeper, the water rising to her waist. She scrubbed at her skin, the soot turning the water around her gray. She washed her face, her hair, letting the icy water cleanse the smoke and the sulfur from her. Kiona had washed the grime from his own face and his burned hand. He moved back down the creek, silent, his senses on high alert. He was checking the perimeter, his eyes scanning the rocks. He rounded the bend of willow and stopped. She was there, standing in the center of the pool, the moonlight turning her skin to pale marble. Her back was to him, her head bowed as she washed her hair. He saw the sharp line of her spine, the new bruises on her back from the fall, and the dark, ugly wound on her shoulder. She was all sharp angles and vulnerability. She must have felt his presence. She froze. Slowly, she turned. She saw him. Her eyes went wide, not with fear, but with shock. She did not scream. She did not move. She just watched him, her hands coming up to cross her chest in a gesture that was both defiant and futile. Kiona did not move. He did not look away. Not at first. He saw her. He saw the blacksmith, the healer, the woman who had charged into darkness with him. He saw the wound he knew she had stitched herself. He saw the strength that was holding her upright in the freezing water. He held her gaze for a single, long second. It was an acknowledgement, a witness. Then, deliberately, he turned his back to her. He walked a dozen paces, to a large boulder, and sat down. He faced the trail, the way they had come, his back a solid wall of protection. "I will keep watch," he said, his voice quiet in the pre-dawn hush. When she was done, she found him just as she had left him. She was dressed in the cleaner shirt she had carried in her saddlebag, her wet hair slicked back. He handed her a strip of clean linen from his own pouch. He had not asked where she got the fresh bandage, and she did not ask where he had gotten this. He led her not to the town, but to a small, hidden place, a line shack, half adobe, half wood, built into the side of a ravine. It was a place he used for hunting, for thinking. It was a place no one else knew. Inside, it was bare, a packed dirt floor, a small stone hearth, a pile of dry blankets. He built a fire with a few practiced movements, the small room filled with warmth and the scent of juniper. Tala sat on one of the blankets, shivering violently as the heat began to touch her. Kiona sat opposite her. He was checking the edge of his knife. I thought Barlow was dead, Tala said, her voice a whisper. At the rock slide. Kiona shook his head. Hate is a strong medicine. It keeps a bad man alive. And in the depot, he wanted to bury us all. She looked at the fire. I am afraid. Kiona, of the judge, of the law. Kane's lawyer will be there. He will have clean papers. We have mud and blood, and a story no one will believe. They will believe the map, Kiona said. They will say we faked it. They will say I am a thief. They already do. She looked at her hands. I am a veterinarian. I am a blacksmith. I am not. This is not my fight. Kiona stopped his work. He looked at her, his eyes dark in the firelight. I said the same. I was a scout. I was a guide. I was not a warrior for my people. I ran from it. I said it was not my fight. I was wrong. He touched the powder burn on his own hand. They make it our fight. They come to our homes. They take our water. They steal our sacred things. He put the knife down. You are afraid. Good. A person who is not afraid is a fool. I was afraid in that tunnel. I was afraid when Barlow lit the fuse. I was afraid I would not get you out. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. You have come to my cabin, he said, his voice low. You have washed at my spring. You have bled for my cousin. You are no longer just the blacksmith. You are here. He moved, sitting not next to her, but in front of her. Your shoulder. It must be cleaned again. The spring water is clean, but the bandage. She shook her head. I cannot. My arm. It will not move right. Allow me, he said. He took the tin of salve she had given him, the one he had never used, from his pouch. He took the clean linen. He was a warrior, a scout. His hands were rough, scarred, one of them freshly burned, but his touch was impossibly gentle. He cleaned the wound. He applied the salve. He worked in silence, his movements economical and precise. Tala watched his face, his brow furrowed in concentration. She did not feel fear. She did not feel shame. She felt seen. When he was done, he did not pull away. He was still kneeling, his face close to hers. I chose to leave my people, he whispered, his voice rough. And I chose to come back. I did not choose what I found. I did not choose the dynamite or the hate. What did you choose? She asked. His eyes held hers. I am choosing this. He raised his good hand, not to her wound, not to her body. He raised it to her face. He gently, with his thumb, wiped a smudge of soot from her cheekbone that she had missed. She did not pull back. She did not flinch. She leaned into his touch, a small, involuntary movement, and her eyes closed. He saw the tremor in her. He saw the exhaustion and the fight that was still burning deep inside. He had seen her at her most vulnerable, in the moonlight, and he had turned away. Now, in the warmth of the fire, she was choosing to be vulnerable, and he chose to honor it. He leaned forward. He kissed her. It was not a kiss of hunger. It was a kiss of promise. It tasted of juniper smoke and cold spring water, and the dry, honest dust of the land they were both fighting for. She did not kiss him back. Not at first. She simply received it, and then her good arm, her right arm, came up. She did not wrap it around him. She placed her hand on his chest, over his heart. A single solid pressure. He lowered his head, resting his forehead against hers. The fire crackled. Outside, the sky was turning from gray to a pale, hopeful blue. Their shadows, cast by the fire, merged on the wall. Sunrise, the saloon was packed. It smelled of stale beer, sawdust, and a thick, heavy tension. Judge Hadley was a thin, old man with a face like a hawk and eyes that missed nothing. He sat at a table at the front, a gavel in his hand. Dawson was there, carried in on a chair, his face pale and tight with pain, his broken leg propped up on a whiskey barrel. Tala stood beside him. She was clean, her hair pulled back, her uncle's clean shirt buttoned to her throat. Her arm was in a neat sling Kiona had made. Kiona himself was not at her side. He stood at the back of the room, near the door, his arms crossed, a silent, watchful presence. "I have read the wire from Sheriff Dawson," Hadley announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "I have read the wire from Ranger Ellison. I am here to investigate allegations of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Sheriff, your report." Dawson began. He spoke of the map. He spoke of the lien. He spoke of the depot. He was interrupted. A man in a black suit, a man Tala had never seen, stood up. "Your Honor, this is a farce. I am Elias Thorne, counsel for the Silver Crown Mining Corporation. These are the delusions of a small-time sheriff and a—" He looked at Tala with contempt. "A transient blacksmith. Sit down, Mr. Thorne. You are not in a city courtroom." "I will not," Thorne said, his face flushing. "I am here to file a complaint. I demand the immediate arrest of this woman, Tala, for the theft of private corporate documents, ledgers, manifests, and proprietary engineering maps." A gasp went through the room. All eyes turned to Tala. Judge Hadley raised an eyebrow. "Theft? You say that is a bold claim. Do you have proof of these stolen documents?" "We will," Thorne said. "When the sheriff searches her forge—" "That will not be necessary," Dawson said, his voice tight with pain. He nodded to Tala. Tala stepped forward. She placed the burned, water-stained shipping ledger on the judge's table. She placed the blasting map, torn and smeared with mud. Next to it— "These, Your Honor?" she asked. Thorne's face went white. He had not expected this. "Sheriff," Hadley said, his voice dangerously quiet as he unrolled the map. "Is this—" "It is," Dawson said. "A blasting plan. For the headwaters, signed with the Silver Crown seal. And the manifest for the dynamite to do it. We have it. We also have this." He held up the affidavit from the retired ranger, confirming the original 1863 grant was for desert land, 5 miles south. The map in the town square is a fraud. The saloon erupted. Men who had been on Kane's payroll, men who had been quiet, suddenly found their voices. They were talking about their water. "Order!" Hadley roared, banging his gavel. "This is inadmissible!" Thorne shouted over the noise. "It was obtained illegally. It is fruit of a poisonous—" A single, sharp crack. It was not the gavel, it was a rifle. The window behind Judge Hadley's head exploded, glass spraying across his table. People screamed. They dived for the floor. Tala grabbed Dawson, pulling him from his chair and onto the ground, shielding him with her own body. Kiona had not moved. He had been watching. He had not watched the judge. He had watched the roofs, across the street. He had seen the flash, the puff of white smoke, from the livery. While the saloon was a mess of screaming, panicked bodies, Kiona was out the door. He was across the street in a second, moving like a deer. He did not use the ladder. He went up the side, using the gaps in the wood. He was on the roof. The sniper was there, trying to reload. He was a ruined-looking man, his face a mass of scars, his arm in a sling, his clothes burned. It was Barlow. "Kiona!" It was not a fight. It was a judgment. Kiona hit him once, a solid blow that knocked the rifle from his hands. He grabbed the man and hauled him to his feet. The door of the saloon slammed open. Kiona threw Barlow into the room. The man landed in a heap in the sawdust, skidding to a stop at the judge's feet. His rifle clattered in after him. The room was silent. Barlow, bleeding from the mouth, looked up. He saw Hadley. He saw Dawson. He saw Tala. And he saw the lawyer, Thorne, who was looking at him with pure horror. Barlow knew it was over. You missed Mr. Barlow, Dawson said from the floor. Trying to kill a judge. That is a hanging offense. Barlow looked at Thorne. You were supposed to get me out, Kane promised. I have no idea who this man is, Thorne stammered, backing away. Barlow began to laugh, a terrible, wet, choking laugh. You liar, you all are. He left me. He left me at the slide. He buried me in that depot. He said, clean up the mess. He said, shoot the judge. Shoot the bitch. Shoot anyone. Just stop the hearing. He looked at Judge Hadley, a wild, desperate look in his eyes. I will talk. I will talk for a drop of whiskey and a different rope. Yeah, we were gonna blow it. The whole valley. It was Kane's plan. Get rid of the ND. Get rid of the town. He wants the silver, sure, but he wants the water more. He wants to own the whole damn desert. Judge Hadley looked at the confession. Lying on the floor, he looked at the lawyer. Mr. Thorne, you are under arrest for conspiracy. He looked at Dawson. Sheriff, put this man, he pointed at Barlow, in irons. Put this woman, he pointed at Tala, in protective custody. This hearing is adjourned. I am placing this town under the authority of the territorial court. It was a victory, a sudden, bloody, absolute victory. As two men dragged Barlow away, he looked at Tala, his eyes burning with a final, bitter hate. You think you won, he spat. You think it is over. You do not know Barrett Kane. This is nothing. He has other ways. He has papers. He has the real law. He will not stop. He will never stop. Tala watched him go. She looked at Dawson, wounded. She looked at Hadley, shuffling the bloody map. And she looked at Kiona, who was standing at the door, watching her. Barlow's warning hung in the air, heavy as the smoke. It was a win, but it was not the end. Barlow's threat was a promise. It was the only honest thing he had ever said. The victory in the saloon was not an ending. It was just a breath before the next blow, and the blow came faster than any of them could have prepared for. Judge Hadley had placed Tala in protective custody, which meant she was sitting in Dawson's office, drinking a cup of scalding, bitter coffee, while the judge himself and a newly deputized townsman were setting Dawson's leg with crude splints and a lot of swearing. Kiona had gone, vanishing as the crowd in the saloon turned into a mob of frightened, angry gossips. He had gone to the high rocks above the town to watch. He knew Kane's men. He knew they did not give up. He was right. It was not an hour later. The sun was barely 2 hands above the horizon. A new cloud of dust appeared on the plain, coming not from the south, as Hadley had, but from the west. It was a fast-moving cloud. 4 riders. Kiona watched them. He saw the glint of the sun on a badge, but it was not Dawson's tin star. This was a different kind of law. The riders did not slow. They clattered down the main street and reined in hard in front of the sheriff's office, their horses lathered and blowing. Their leader was a thick-set man with a heavy, drooping mustache and cold, gray eyes. He wore a formal blue coat, despite the heat, and his badge was a polished silver shield. Territorial Marshal, it read. This was Marshal Locke. He did not knock. He kicked the door open. Tala and Dawson, who was now lying on his cot, his face slick with sweat, both flinched. Sheriff Dawson, Locke said, his voice a low, heavy rumble. He did not sound impressed. He did not sound concerned. He sounded annoyed. Marshal, Dawson grunted, his hand moving near his pistol. I am here on territorial business, Locke said, pulling a folded paper from his breast pocket. I have a warrant. A warrant, Dawson said, trying to push himself up. For who Barlow is in the cell, Thorne is next to him. My warrant is not for them, Locke said. He looked at Tala. His gaze was slow, insulting. He looked her up and down, from her patched shirt to her dusty boots. "I have a warrant for the arrest of one Tala, for fraud, for the falsification of tax documents, and for the theft of territorial land grants." Tala stood up. "What? That is a lie. Judge Hadley—" "Judge Hadley is a circuit judge," Locke said, stepping into the room. His two deputies fanned out behind him. "He has no jurisdiction over a territorial matter. This," he waved the paper, "comes from the capital, from the land office. It seems your uncle's debt was not just to the council. It was to the territory of Arizona, and you, ma'am, have been attempting to defraud the government of its rightful property by forging a claim. You tried to pass off a forged deed." It was a lie, a brilliant, suffocating, perfect lie. Kane had not just been working on the local council. He had been working on the capital. He had turned her uncle's debt into a territorial debt. He had taken her proof, the ranger's affidavit, and twisted it, claiming she was the one with the fraudulent paper. "You cannot," Dawson snarled. "I have the evidence. I have Barlow's confession. I have the blasting map." "You have a pile of tavern gossip and stolen corporate papers, Sheriff," Locke said, his voice bored. "I have a federal warrant. Now, step aside." "Like hell," Dawson said. Locke drew his pistol. It was a casual, easy movement. He did not point it at Dawson. He pointed it at the ceiling. "I will not be drawn on by a cripple, but I will not be stopped. Either. My deputies will take the woman. You will give me the key to the cell." "This is Kane," Tala said, her voice shaking with rage. "This is Barrett Kane. He's paying you." Marshal Locke actually smiled, a thin, cold lifting of his mustache. "I do not know the name. I know the law." He nodded to his men. "Take her." Tala did not fight. She knew it was useless. They were the law. They grabbed her, one on each arm, and their hands were rough. They pulled her out into the street. The entire town was watching. Mrs. Gable was on the porch of the general store, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. "Where are you taking her?" Dawson yelled from the doorway. "To the cell," Locke said. "She will be held here until I can arrange transport to the capital. And Sheriff, your protective custody is over." They threw Tala into the cell next to Barlow and Thorne. The cell stank of fear and unwashed bodies. Barlow looked at her from the shadows and began to laugh. A low, bubbling sound. "What did I tell you?" he rasped. "He never stops. He will win. He always wins." Tala ignored him. She went to the small, barred window. She could see the town. She could see the people, looking at the jail, whispering. She was a thief. She was a fraud. Kane had won. She was held overnight. It was the longest night of her life. The jail was a small stone box. She listened to Thorne weeping in the dark, and to Barlow humming a tuneless, awful song. She did not sleep. She waited. Kiona had watched it all from the rocks. He had seen Locke arrive. He had seen them take her. He had seen the town turn away. He knew what Locke was. He was a man who could be bought, but he was also the law. A direct attack was impossible. He could not fight 4 territorial marshals. He could not storm the jail. If he did, Tala would be a fugitive. She would be branded an outlaw. And so would he. They would be hunted. They would lose everything. The land, the forge, the fight. He remembered Barlow's words. He has other ways. He has papers. He has the real law. Kiona knew he had to fight back not with a knife, but with paper. The warrant said, falsification of tax documents. The warrant was based on the lien. The lien was based on her uncle's loan. The loan shark's ledger. But what if the original tax bill, the one the loan was supposedly for, was a lie? He had to know. He had to see the original piece of paper, the one before Kane's men, before Barlow, before the 500% interest. That paper would not be in Red Arroyo. It would be in the regional records office. It would be in Willow Pass, a 2-day ride. He did not have 2 days. Luck would move her. He had to ride there and back before the next dawn. He did not go to his village. He did not gather warriors. He went to his hidden cabin. He took his best horse, the Pinto's lean, fast brother. He took a canteen of water and a handful of jerky, and he rode. He did not take the road. He took the high ridges, the old Enda trails, the ones that cut across the land like a hawk's flight. He ran the horse hard, in the brutal, late morning sun. He was racing the law. He rode through the afternoon, the heat of physical weight. He reached the edge of the great desert, the Malpais, a place of black, volcanic rock and shifting sands. The road went around it, a 2-day journey. Kiona went through it. It was a hell of rock and heat. He had to dismount to lead the horse, his moccasins slipping on the treacherous, glassy rock. The horse was blowing, its eyes wild, but Kiona pushed on. As evening fell, the wind rose, a sandstorm. It came out of the west, a roiling brown wall that swallowed the sky. Kiona did not stop. He wrapped a cloth over his face, turned his back to the wind, and kept moving. The sand scoured his skin. The wind shrieked, a chorus of demons. He put his head down. He thought of Tala, in her cell. He thought of her face in the moonlight. At the spring, he walked. He came out of the storm after midnight. He was on the other side. The horse was lame, a stone in its hoof. He was on foot. Willow Pass was still 10 miles. He ran. He ran, his breath of fire in his lungs. He was a scout. He was a runner. He ran. He reached Willow Pass at 3 in the morning. It was a larger town, a sleeping town. He knew where the records office was, a small brick building next to the courthouse. The door was locked, of course. He did not use his knife. He used his skill. He climbed. He went up the side, using a drain pipe, and onto the roof. A window. It was latched. He took a strip of rawhide from his pouch. He worked it through the crack. He looped it. He pulled. The latch clicked open. He was inside. The building smelled of old paper, dust, and mice. He had no light. He did not need one. He used his hands. He felt the labels on the shelves. Territorial, county, tax. He found the books for Red Arroyo, 1878, 1879. He found the ledger. He found the page for her uncle. He ran his finger down the column. He found it, a single entry, municipal safety fee. A tax. He felt the paper. It was different. It was thicker. It had been glued in. It was a forgery. The real page was underneath. Kiona took his knife, carefully, his burned hand steady. He slit the paper. He peeled back the forged entry. And there it was, the original, her uncle's name, a tax bill, for $10, not $200, and a signature at the bottom, paid in full, August 1879. The entire debt, the lien, the warrant, it was all a lie, built on this one, small piece of forged paper. He heard a sound, a chair scraping, in the front office. He froze. He was not alone. He slid the book back onto the shelf. He took only the one, single, original page. He folded it and put it inside his shirt. He heard footsteps. A man with a lantern. "Who is in here?" a voice called. It was an old man's voice, the clerk. Kiona melted into the shadows of the stacks. The old man, a tiny man in a nightshirt, raised his lantern. "I have a shotgun. Son, I suggest you come out." Kiona stepped out. His hands were empty. The old man, a man named Peters, lowered the shotgun. His eyes went wide. "Kiona, son of the sky, is that you?" Kiona had been a boy. He had brought this man, a lost prospector then, back to his village. His mother had healed the man's broken leg. The man had never forgotten. "Peters," Kiona said. His voice was a rasp. "My God, boy, what are you doing?" "I am saving a life," Kiona said. He pointed to the book. That page, the one for the Red Arroyo blacksmith, it is a lie. Peters nodded, his old face sad. I know. A man came. 2 days ago. A man in a suit. He made me do it. He said he would burn my house. He said he had a new page. From the Capitol. I have the old one. Kiona said, I am taking it. They will hang you. Son, they will hang me. They will hang my friend if I do not. Kiona said. The door to the office burst open. 2 men, the same men who had ridden with Locke, stood there. They had been waiting. It was a trap. There he is, one of them said. The Indian, grab him. Kiona did not run for the window. He ran for the men. He grabbed the heavy tax ledger from the shelf. It weighed 50 pounds. He threw it. He threw it at the lantern in the deputy's hand. The lantern shattered. The office plunged into darkness, the smell of burning kerosene filling the air. Fire! Peters screamed. Kiona grabbed the old man and threw him behind the heavy oak desk. Stay down. The deputies were coughing, blind. Kiona was not. He was out the window, back on the roof, before they had even cleared their eyes. He dropped to the street. He heard a pistol shot behind him. Wild. He was in the stable. His horse was lame. He took the best horse in the stable, a big gray stallion that belonged to Marshal Locke himself. He left his lame pinto as payment, and he rode. He rode back into the desert. He rode as the sun came up. He rode, the stolen horse flying over the sand. He rode toward Red Arroyo. He rode toward the dawn. Back in the jail, Tala was on her feet. She had heard the riders. Marshal Locke was in the street. His men were saddling the horses. A wagon was being brought. He was moving her. He was taking her to the Capitol. No, Tala said. She was not a victim. She grabbed the bars. No, Judge Hadley Dawson. He is taking me. He is taking me now. Hadley burst from the saloon, still in his nightshirt. Locke, what is the meaning of this? I have a hearing. This is not your jurisdiction, Judge, Locke said, swinging onto his horse. The woman is a federal prisoner. She is a witness in my investigation, Hadley roared. Tough, Locke said. Put her in the wagon. Dawson was there, on his cot, dragged onto the boardwalk by 2 men. You cannot do this. Locke, it is illegal. It is the law. Sheriff, now, stand aside, or I will have you arrested for interfering. The deputies opened her cell. They grabbed her. She fought. She kicked. She was a blacksmith. She was strong. It took both of them to drag her into the street. The town was watching, silent. You are all cowards, Tala screamed, her voice breaking. He is stealing your water. He is stealing your land, and you are letting him. Put her in, Locke ordered. They were forcing her toward the wagon when they heard it. A horse, running full out. Who in the hell? Locke started. Kiona. He came down the street, on a gray horse that was half foam, half sweat. He did not stop for Locke. He did not stop for the deputies. He rode the horse right up onto the boardwalk and reined in a cloud of splinters, in front of Judge Hadley. He was covered in dust, his face streaked with sweat, his clothes torn. He swung from the saddle, and he held up a single, yellowed, creased piece of paper. The law, Kiona panted, holding the paper out to Hadley. The real law. Locke had his gun out. Get him! He is under arrest! He assaulted my men! He stole my horse! Wait, Hadley said, his voice sharp. He took the paper from Kiona's hand. He read it. His old eyes scanned the lines. He looked at the signature. He looked at the date. He looked at the words, paid in full. He looked at Marshal Locke, and his eyes were chips of ice. Marshal, Hadley said, his voice very, very soft. This is an original tax receipt from the Territorial Records Office. It proves that the debt in your warrant was paid a year ago. It proves, he held the paper up for the town to see, that your warrant is a forgery. The street was silent. You could hear the wind. Locke stared at the paper. That
That is impossible.
It is a fact, Hadley said. And a fact is a stubborn thing. Your warrant is void. Your authority here is ended, and I am placing you under arrest. For kidnapping, for aiding in a conspiracy, for fraud. You cannot, Locke stammered.
Oh, I can,
Hadley said. He looked at Dawson. Sheriff, your pistol. Dawson, his face split in a grin of pure, painful joy, tossed his pistol to the judge. Hadley caught it. He pointed it at Locke.
Get down from your horse. Marshal, very, very slowly.
Tala had not moved. She was standing, frozen, between the two deputies. She was looking at Kiona. He was looking at her. He was covered in filth. He had ridden through hell. For her. The town, the one that had been silent, found its voice. It was not a cheer. It was a low, angry growl. The men who had been quiet, the men who had been afraid, they were not afraid anymore. They began to step off the boardwalk. They began to surround Locke and his two remaining men.
Judge,
Tala said, her voice clear, and it cut through the noise. Everyone looked at her. She was not a victim. She was not a blacksmith. She was a fury. She pointed at Locke. She pointed at the jailed lawyer. Thorne. She pointed at the silent Silver Crown office.
This is not over,
she said, her voice ringing.
It is not enough to arrest him. I demand a full criminal investigation of the Silver Crown Mining Corporation. I demand Barrett Kane be brought here, in chains. I demand a trial. I demand justice.
The crowd roared. It was a real full-throated cheer this time. They had found their champion. Marshal Locke, his face gray, slowly, very slowly, raised his hands. Kiona watched Tala. He watched her stand before the town, not as a woman in need of saving, but as a leader. He had brought her the paper, but she was the one who was turning it into a sword. The cheer that followed Tala's demand for justice was a new sound in Red Arroyo. It was the sound of a town finding its backbone. It was loud, and it was unified. And it was, for a moment, a perfect, cleansing fire. It lasted less than 5 minutes. Over the ringing in their ears, over the sound of Marshal Locke protesting as he was led to his own jail cell, came a new sound. It was not the sound of a few riders. It was the sound of a small army, a low, growing thunder of hooves, coming from the north. Kiona, standing at the edge of the boardwalk, was the first to see them. His face, which had shown a moment of hard-won peace, turned to stone.
Tala,
he said, his voice low and urgent.
Get Dawson. Get the judge. Get them inside. Now!
What is it? Tala asked, her hand on the pistol Judge Hadley had not yet taken back.
It is him,
Kiona said. The riders, 20 of them at least, did not slow down. They were not lawmen. They were hard cases, gunmen in black dusters, their faces grim. They were not coming for a hearing. They were coming for a war. At their head rode a man Tala had never seen, but she knew him instantly. He was dressed in a fine, black broadcloth suit, a city man, but he sat his horse like a warlord. He was handsome, in a cold, sharp way, with a neatly trimmed black beard and eyes that were as flat and dead as obsidian. This was Barrett Kane.
Mr. Thorne,
Kane called, his voice booming, clear and strong, as his men fanned out, creating a line that blocked the entire street. Marshal Locke report. No answer came from the jail. Kane's face, which had been set in a look of mild arrogance, darkened. He looked at the crowd. He saw Judge Hadley. He saw Tala. He saw Dawson, his leg in a splint, on the cot. And he saw Kiona, standing alone, his rifle in his hand. A welcoming party, Kane said. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. How thoughtful. It seems there has been a misunderstanding. I am here to post bail for my lawyer, and for the marshal, who is under my protection. Your protection. Judge Hadley stepped forward, his nightshirt still visible under his coat. Marshal Locke is under arrest, sir, as is your lawyer, as is your man Barlow, and as of this moment, so are you. Kane laughed. It was a short, sharp bark. You, he said, are a comical old man. You have no authority here. This town is a property of the Silver Crown Mining Corporation, and all of you, he gestured to the crowd, are trespassing. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. The war began. His men did not fire into the crowd. They fired over their heads, into the buildings, into the sky. It was a wave of thunder. Get them, Kane roared. It was chaos. The townsfolk screamed and scattered. Kiona grabbed Tala and threw her behind the horse trough. Stay down. Kane's men had two goals. The first was the jail. 3 of them dismounted, carrying a small keg. It was blasting powder. They put it against the jail's solid wood door. Fire in the hole, one of them yelled. The explosion tore the front of the jail apart. Smoke and splinters flew. A moment later, Marshal Locke, coughing, staggered out, followed by a terrified, weeping Elias Thorne. Then Barlow. He came out, his eyes wild. Kane, still on his horse, looked down at him. He unholstered his own pistol and tossed it to him. Mr. Barlow, you have failed me at every turn. Here is your one final chance to earn your pay. Barlow caught the gun, his scarred face splitting in a grin. With pleasure, Mr. Kane. He turned and saw Tala, peering over the edge of the trough. He raised the pistol. Kiona fired. His shot was not at Barlow. It was at the sign on the saloon, just above his head. Splinters rained down, making Barlow flinch and duck. Run! Kiona yelled at Tala, pulling her toward the alley. But the attack was a feint, a brutal, loud, and brilliant feint. As the town was pinned down, as Dawson was trying to organize a defense from his cot, as Kiona and Tala were fighting for their lives, Barrett, Kane, and 10 of his men, including the newly freed Locke, had wheeled their horses. They were riding, hard, out of the town. They were not riding north or west. They were riding east, toward the Enda village. Kiona saw it. He stopped in the alley, his blood turning to ice. No, no! He grabbed Tala. The village. He is not fighting for the town. He is fighting for the valley. He is going to my home. It was too late. The first column of smoke was already rising in the distance, a thick black pillar against the clean morning sky. They ran for the horses. As they mounted, a boy, a young Enda boy, came stumbling out of the brush. He was bleeding from a cut on his head. He had run all the way. They came, he gasped, falling at Kiona's feet. They set fire to the lodges. They took... He was sobbing, unable to speak. Who? Kiona said, pulling him to his feet. Who did they take? The children, the boy cried. They took Sani and Little Bird. They are gone. The man in the black coat. He has them. A rider from Kane's remaining men, a man left behind, trotted forward. He held a white flag. He stopped 50 yards away. A message, he yelled. From Mr. Kane. He read from a paper. To the terrorists of Red Arroyo and their savage allies. I have 2 of the children. They are, for the moment, unharmed. I have a bill of sale, a simple deed, transferring ownership of the valley known as Chil Da to the Silver Crown Corporation. The ND leaders will sign it. The blacksmith, Tala, will sign as witness. You have 1 hour. Bring the signed deed to the Red Hollow Quarry. If you are late, or if you bring anyone else, I will send the children back, in pieces. The rider dropped the paper in the dust and galloped away. Tala looked at Kiona. His face was a mask she had never seen before. It was not anger. It was not rage. It was a cold, absolute emptiness. He was a man who had been pushed past the edge of the world. Red Hollow? Tala said, her voice shaking. I know it. It is an old quarry.
It is a box canyon. It is a death trap. It is where we are going, Kiona said. He turned to the townsmen, who were now gathering, their rifles in their hands. He looked at Dawson, who had been helped onto a horse, his splinted legs sticking out at an awful angle. They are your children, too, Kiona said, his voice raw. He will poison your water. He has burned our homes. Will you stand there? For the first time, the men of Red Arroyo did not look away. They did not shuffle their feet. They looked at the smoke. They looked at Kiona, and they nodded. We ride, Dawson said, his voice tight with pain. We ride. Red Hollow Quarry was a scar on the land, a place of steep, crumbling cliffs and deep shadows. Smoke from the burning village had settled in the canyon, making the air thick and hard to breathe. Tala and Kiona went in first, on foot. The posse, led by Dawson, was half a mile back, waiting for the signal. They saw them, on a high, wide ledge, near the old powder shed. Kane was there, as was Marshal Locke, and Barlow, his pistol in his hand, looking proud and useful, and the two children, a boy and a girl, no older than 5 and 6. They were tied. Kane was holding the girl, his hand over her mouth. I see you, Kane called, his voice echoing from the cliffs. The blacksmith and the scout. Do you have the paper? Did you sign it? Let the children go, Tala yelled, her voice breaking. They have nothing to do with this. They are collateral, Kane yelled back. Just like your forge, just like this whole miserable town now. The papers show it to me. We have it, Tala lied, stepping into the open, her hands raised. We will give it to you. Just bring it up, Kane said, smiling, slowly. Kiona, on the rocks above, shook his head. It is a trap. He will kill us all. I know, Tala whispered. Look, to the left, the powder shed. There is a wire, a detonator wire. Kiona saw it, a thin, black wire, running from a plunger box near Kane, down toward the entrance of the quarry. He is going to blow the entrance, Kiona said. He is going to seal us in here and kill us. While I am walking, Tala said. You move. Get to the children. I will stop the wire. No, Kiona said. It is too dangerous. I will. You are the only one who can make that shot, Tala said, her eyes meeting his. I am the only one who can get close. Trust me. She began to walk, her hands high. I am coming up. Kane, I have the paper. So good of you to be reasonable, Kane called, his voice full of mocking humor. Tala walked, her boots sliding on the loose scree. She walked with her eyes on Kane, but her path was taking her toward the powder shed. Kiona was gone. He had vanished into the rocks, climbing to a high perch that overlooked the ledge. Tala was halfway up. Kane was watching her, his smile fixed. Marshal Locke was watching her. Only Barlow was looking around, nervous, his guilt and his new gun making him jumpy. It was Barlow who saw the posse. Dawson had moved too soon. They were coming, a line of 20 riders, thundering into the canyon. Kane, Barlow yelled. It is a trap. They are here, the whole town. Kane's smile vanished. He turned. He saw the riders. Fools, he screamed. You are all fools. He ran to the detonator box. I will bury you all. He grabbed the handle. Tala was 10 yards from the wire. She was too far. She lunged, pulling the heavy pry bar she had tucked into her belt. She threw it, a desperate, spinning throw. The heavy steel bar landed on the wire, severing it from the detonator cap. A fraction of a second before Kane slammed the plunger down. Nothing happened. A click. Kane stared at the box. He looked at the wire. He saw Tala, and he saw the pry bar. His face contorted in a mask of pure rage. He drew his pistol. You, he screamed. Barlow saw his chance. He was trapped.
The posse was below. Cain was above. He made his choice. "Cain," he yelled, raising the pistol you had given him. "The deal is off. I will talk. I will tell them everything Cain did not hesitate. He spun, his pistol bucking in his hand. He shot Barlow in the chest. Barlow staggered. He looked down at the blood, a look of profound surprise on his face. He looked at Tala.
He did it all."
Barlow gasped, his voice a wet rattle.
"He stole the sky bundle. He planned the dynamite. He
crumpled to the ground.
Dead."
Cain turned back. The posse was dismounting, firing. Bullets sparked off the rocks around him. Marshal Locke had already thrown down his gun, his hands in the air, surrendering to the inevitable. Cain was alone. He lunged. He grabbed the little girl, Sani. He pulled her up, using her as a shield. He put his knife, a long, glittering blade, to her throat. "Stop!" he shrieked, his voice breaking. "Stop, or she dies. All of you drop your guns. Drop them, or I will kill her." The firing stopped. The posse, Dawson, Tala, everyone froze. Cain was laughing, a high, thin sound. "I knew it. You are all weak, all of you. Now, back away. Give me a horse. I am leaving." Tala stood in the open. Her hands were empty. She was a target. She looked at Cain. She looked at the terrified child. She took a step forward. "No," she said. "I will do it," Cain screamed, the knife pressing, drawing a drop of blood. "Let her go, Cain," Tala said, her voice shaking, but clear and strong. She took another step. "It is over. You killed your men. You have nowhere to run. It is me you want. Let her go." "Tala, no!" Dawson yelled. "It is me," Tala said, walking slowly, her hands open, her good shoulder aching, her bad shoulder on fire. "I am the one who stopped you. Let her go, and take me." Cain was staring at her. He was mesmerized by this new, impossible target. He was a man of greed, and she was the one thing he could not have, and could not break. He wanted her to beg. He wanted her to crawl. It was the distraction Kiona had been waiting for. He was on a high ledge, sighting down the barrel of his rifle. He was not aiming at Cain. He was aiming at the knife. It was an impossible shot. 100 yards, a moving target. He breathed out. He saw the moonlight on the water. He saw Tala's face in the firelight. He squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle was a single, sharp note. It did not hit the knife. It hit the hand that held it. The knife flew from Cain's numb fingers. The child fell, scrambling away. Cain screamed, clutching his shattered hand. He looked up. Kiona was there. He had not stayed on the ledge. He was on Cain, a blur of motion, tackling him to the ground. He put his own knife to Cain's throat. The posse swarmed the ledge. Dawson, his face white, was carried up. He had a pair of iron handcuffs. "Barrett Cain," Dawson said, his voice shaking with pain and triumph. "You are under arrest for murder, for kidnapping, for everything." Marshal Locke, his hands already bound, was being led away. He saw Dawson. You will not get away with this. I have friends." "You have a date with a federal judge," Dawson said. Tala ran to the children, untying them, holding them as they cried. Kiona was still standing over Cain. He was searching his saddlebags, which were still on the horse. He pulled out a small, oilcloth-wrapped bundle. He walked over to where the townsfolk and the endorse who had followed the smoke were now standing, side by side, watching. He unwrapped it. It was the sky bundle. A gasp went up from the ende. Kiona's mother, who had arrived with the others, stepped forward. She looked at the bundle. She looked at Cain, who was now bound. She looked at Tala, who was holding the children. She walked over to Tala. She did not speak. She simply placed her hand on Tala's good shoulder, a sign of respect, a sign of thanks.
The townspeople saw it all. They saw the stolen children. They saw the sacred object. They saw the dead body of Barlow. They saw their own sheriff, wounded but victorious. They saw the man who had tried to poison their water. The last of their doubt, the last of their fear, turned to cold, hard certainty. They had their proof. The Red Arroyo saloon had never been so quiet. It was a different kind of silence. It was not the hush of fear that Barrett Kane had commanded, nor the breathless tension of a showdown. It was the heavy, sober quiet of judgment. The whiskey bottles were still on the shelves, but the tables were arranged in neat rows. At the front, at the same table where he had been shot at, Judge Hadley sat. His gavel was a borrowed blacksmith hammer from Tala's forge. Barrett Kane, Marshal Locke, and the lawyer Thorne were brought in. They were in chains. Their arrogance was gone, replaced by a sullen, bitter anger. Kane's hand was wrapped in a bloody bandage. Locke, stripped of his badge, stared at the floor. The town was there, the whole of it. Mrs. Gable sat in the front row, her face pale, her hands clasped. The men of the posse stood along the walls, their rifles held loosely. They were not spectators, they were guardians. The Ende were there. Kiona's mother, his young cousin, and a dozen elders sat in the rows that had been cleared for them. Kiona stood beside them. He was not armed, not in a way that could be seen. He was simply present, a pillar of quiet fact. Tala sat beside Sheriff Dawson, who was propped up in a chair, his broken leg resting on a crate. His face was gray with pain, but his eyes were sharp. "This," Judge Hadley began, his voice filling the room, "is not a formal trial. That will take place at the territorial capital, where these men will answer for their crimes of murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy." He looked at Kane, his eyes cold. "But there are matters of local law, of property, and of justice that fall under my authority, and I will see them settled. Now." He did not need witnesses. The evidence was overwhelming. The dying confession of Barlow, the testimony of the entire posse, the blasting map, the children who had been stolen. "First," Hadley said. He held up the single, yellowed piece of paper that Kiona had ridden through hell to retrieve. "The matter of the Red Arroyo smithy. The court finds that the debt claimed by the town council was based on a forged document, and that the original tax bill of $10 was paid in full. The lien is void. The property belongs, free and clear, to Tala, its rightful owner." A murmur of approval. Tala felt a breath she had been holding for weeks finally escape her. She nodded, once, to the judge. "Second," Hadley continued, "the matter of the valley known as Childa. This court has reviewed the affidavit from Ranger Ellison. It has seen the fraudulent grant of 1863. It is the judgment of this court that the Silver Crown Mining Corporation has no claim, legal or moral, to that land. Their charter is revoked. Their assets within this territory are frozen. The valley is, and shall remain, the stewardship of the Indi people." He paused, and he did something no one in the room had ever seen. He stood up, a frail old man in a black coat, and he turned to face Kiona's mother. "On behalf of the law of this territory," Hadley said, his voice no longer that of a judge, but of a man, "I offer a formal apology. We have failed you. We have allowed greed to wear the mask of progress. That stops today." It was over. The law, which had been Kane's greatest weapon, had finally, truly, turned against him. The next day, there was a funeral. It was not for Barlow, or the other men Kane had hired. Their bodies were buried in a single, unmarked grave at the edge of the desert. The funeral was for the two people who had died in the fire at the End Lodge, a young woman and an old man who had been too slow to flee. They were buried on the hill overlooking Red Arroyo, on a piece of land that belonged to no one, and so belonged to everyone. The new preacher, a young, earnest man sent to replace the disgraced Hobbs, said a few words. But the real words were spoken by Dawson, who leaned on his crutches and spoke of sacrifice, and by Kiona's mother, who spoke of healing. Townsfolk and Endy stood side by side, their hats in their hands. Mrs. Gable, in a gesture that stunned the town, stepped forward and laid a simple wool blanket on the grave. It was a sign, as if the land itself was sighing in relief. The sky, which had been a clear, brutal blue for 6 long months, clouded over that night for the first time since Tala had arrived. It rained. It was not a storm. It was a slow, steady, soaking rain. The drought, the long, hard season of fear, was broken. The springs, saved from dynamite, ran full and clear. Life began to settle. Sheriff Dawson's re-election was not an election at all. It was an affirmation. He was carried to the saloon, which was now just a saloon again, and toasted. He made a short speech, his hand on the star that Marshal Locke had tried to take. "I am not just here to keep the peace," he said, his voice rough. "I am here to keep the trust. This town, and our neighbors. We are one community, and I will not let corruption find a foothold here again. Not while I am breathing." Kiona, by a unanimous vote of both the town council and the ND elders, was named the official liaison. It was his job to manage the trade, to settle the small disputes, and to be the bridge he had always been meant to be. He was no longer a man of 2 worlds, trapped between. He was a man of one community, holding it together. Tala went back to work. Her forge was a ruin, the door blown off, the interior scarred. She did not have to rebuild it alone. On the first day, the men who had been in the posse, the same men who had once looked at her with suspicion, showed up. They brought lumber. They brought food. "A town needs a blacksmith, ma'am," one of them said, tipping his hat. "And it seems we need a veterinarian, too." She worked, her wounded shoulder healing clean. The rhythm of the hammer was her medicine. It was the sound of life. When the smithy was rebuilt, stronger than before, she painted a new sign. She painted it in neat, black letters, Red Arroyo Smithy and Veterinary Care. She finished, and Kiona, who had been watching her, took a smaller brush, beneath her words, in the sharp, beautiful script of his own people. He painted the same. It was the first sign in Red Arroyo to speak 2 languages. It was a promise. With Kane's assets seized, Judge Hadley had done one last thing before he left. He had established a community fund. The money would not go to the government. It would go back to the land. The Chil Da Preservation Fund was created. Its first act was to ensure the valley remained untouched. Its second was to build a proper clinic, an adobe structure attached to Tala's forge, for the health of the animals and the agriculture of the entire region. Tala was named its manager. It would provide jobs, good jobs, for both Ende women who understood the old medicines, and young townsfolk who wanted to learn a new trade. The poor families, the ones who had been dry farming dust, were given access to the new, shared irrigation lines, planned by Kiona and funded by the court. The desert, slowly, began to bloom. Tala was cleaning the new clinic one evening. Weeks later, the sun was setting, painting the cliffs of Red Hollow, now a place of peace, in shades of orange and purple. The air was cool and smelled of wet dust and juniper. Kiona came to her. He was not on his horse. He walked. He entered the smithy, his moccasins silent on the packed earth. She was washing her hands in a bucket, the soot of the day turning the water gray. She looked up and smiled. "Sheriff Dawson's horse has a split hoof, and Mrs. Gable's hound has pups. A busy day." "It is a good life," he said. He was not looking at her work. He was looking at her. "It is," she said. She dried her hands on a piece of clean cloth. "I have a home. I have my work. I have friends." He stepped closer. He had something in his hands. He was holding a length of soft, smoked buckskin. "In my village, When a man builds a house, he is alone. When he has a partner, he has a home. Tala's heart, which had been so steady, gave a small, painful leap. "Kiona, this is your forge," he said, his voice quiet. "This is your life. You earned it. I am not asking you to leave it." He paused. "And I have my village. I have my people. I cannot leave them." "I know," she said, her voice small. "But a house is just wood," he said, "and a village is just a place. Home. Home is the person you choose to stand with." He looked at her, his eyes holding the same intensity she had seen in the firelight of his cabin, the night she had chosen him. "Stand with me, Tala. Not behind me, not in front of me, with me." She had fought for her independence. She had come west to be her own woman, to need no one. And she had found the one man who understood that, who did not want to own her, or protect her into weakness. He just wanted to stand with her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." They did not have a white wedding in the church. They did not have a full end-day ceremony in the valley. They had something new. They stood on the hill where the funeral had been, the hill that overlooked both the town and the valley. It was just them, and their witnesses. Dawson was there, his leg now in a proper cast, leaning on a cane, and Kiona's mother was there, wrapped in a blanket of blue and red. Tala wore her canvas work trousers and a clean white shirt. Kiona wore his simple buckskins. Kiona's mother stepped forward. She did not chant. She spoke. "A woman of iron," she said, looking at Tala. "A man of the wind. Your spirits are different, but you both love the land. You both honor the truth. Let the iron give the wind its strength. Let the wind give the iron its song." She tied their hands together, not with a rope, but with a single braided strand of horsehair, one black, one white. Then Dawson spoke. "I am not a preacher," he grumbled, his face red, "but I am the law, and I have never seen two people more suited. You fought for this place. You fought for each other, by the authority of this town, and the good sense God gave me. Well, you are partners. Now, shake on it." Kiona looked at Tala. She looked at him. They did not shake. He took a pouch from his belt. It was the medicine bag he had carried, the one she had filled. It was empty now. Save for one thing, he gave it to her. She took a small, sharp knife from her boot. It was the first thing she had forged in her new smithy. It was perfectly balanced, the steel dark and strong. She gave it to him. He took her good hand. She took his burned one. They stood there as the sun went down, the bound hands a promise, the desert wind blowing cool and clean around them. The land, which had held its breath for a generation, finally drank. The rains that began after the trial were not a flood, but a long, steady promise. The dust of red arroyo settled, and the air smelled of wet creosote and life. The springs, which Barrett Kane had tried to poison, ran clear and full, the water bubbling over the sandstone, no longer a source of conflict, but a shared gift. To celebrate, the ND and the townspeople held a festival. It was not a formal holiday, but a new thing, born of shared survival. They held it in the mouth of Childa, the sacred valley, which was now protected not just by Ende law, but by territorial law, with Judge Hadley's signature drying on the new charter. It was a strange and beautiful sight. Men who had only ever seen each other over the barrel of a rifle were now sharing a roasted deer. Kiona's mother, her face a map of dignified wrinkles, sat with Mrs. Gable, teaching her how to grind the sweet mesquite beans. They did not share a language, but they shared a quiet respect. The children, who had been the first to forget the old hatreds, ran races, their laughter echoing off the canyon walls. They danced, not the formal, stiff dances of the East, but something new, a mix of the fiddle's high, fast reel and the steady, deep pulse of the Ende drums. They exchanged gifts. Mrs. Gable, her face softened by a new humility, gave Kiona's mother a bolt of fine blue wool, and received, in turn, a perfectly woven basket, tight enough to hold water.
Tala watched from the edge of the firelight. Kiona stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back. She had never felt so at peace. Her smithy was thriving, but it was no longer just her smithy. She had started a class twice a week. The forge was filled not with the sound of her hammer alone, but with the cacophony of 6. She was teaching the trade. She had 3 apprentices, 2 boys from the town, sons of ranchers who had lost their herds in the drought, and 3 young Ende, including Kiona's cousin, the boy she had first healed. He had a natural talent. His hands, which had only known the bow and the knife, learned the hammer and the tongs. Tala taught them not just how to shoe a horse or mend a plow. She taught them the art of it. She taught them how to read the color of the metal, how to feel the steel give way, how to make something strong and useful from a piece of cold, dead iron. She was building more than tools. She was forging a new generation, one that saw worth in work and in each other. Kiona, too, was a teacher. He had taken the title of liaison and made it his own. He was no longer a scout for an army. He was a guide for his people. His new patrol was not one of war, but of preservation. He led the children, both from the town and his village, on long walks through the high country. He took them on the new forest patrol route, a trail he and Tala had marked out, which now served as the valley's official boundary. He did not just teach them how to track or how to find water in a dry wash. He taught them the stories of the land. He showed them the hawk's nest and explained why the hawk was his brother. He showed them the spring and explained how the water was the blood of the earth and how it belonged to no one and to everyone. He was teaching them how to live in this new world, not as its master, but as its partner. He was giving them the spirit of the West, not the one of conquest and gold, but the true one, the spirit of resilience, of community, and of a freedom that was tied to the land, not to a fence. Justice had begun, but the world was still the world. One afternoon, a month after the rains began, Sheriff Dawson rode out to the smithy. He was walking now, his leg healing, though he would always have a limp. He carried a cane, one Tala had made for him, the handle capped with a polished piece of silver ore from canes abandoned. And now, forfeit, claim. He handed Tala a telegraph slip. It was from Judge Hadley, in the capital. "They did it," Dawson said, a rare smile on his leathery face. "They found the money, the trail that Locke left." Tala read the message. A territorial commissioner, a man who had never set foot in Red Arroyo, had been exposed. He was the one who had taken Kane's bribe, who had signed the forged land grants, who had issued the warrant for her arrest. He had been removed from office. He was facing trial. "So," Tala said, folding the paper. "It is really over." Dawson shook his head, his smile fading. "It is a start. Tala, it is a good start. We cut the head off this snake, but there are other snakes, the Silver Crown Corporation. It is bigger than Kane. They will be back, in 10 years or 20, with new lawyers and new lies." Tala looked at her forge, at the young men hammering away, their faces bright with sweat and pride. "Then we will be here to meet them, and this time, we will be ready." Dawson nodded. The fight was not over. It would never be over. But for the first time, the odds were even. That night, Tala did not stay in her small room behind the smithy. She rode the Pinto Kiona had given her, the one she had first healed, up the canyon to the small, hidden shack, his cabin. Kiona was there. He had a fire going. It was not a large fire, just a small, warm heart in the center of the room. He was sitting on the floor, mending a piece of leather harness. She sat across from him, in the space that had become hers. For a long time, they just sat, listening to the crackle of the fire and the sound of the rain, which had begun again. A soft drumming on the sod roof. "Dawson," Tala said, breaking the comfortable silence. "He brought news. They arrested the commissioner in the capital. The man Kane paid." Kiona nodded. He did not look surprised. "Good,"
The poison is out of the stream." "He said they will come back," Tala said, her voice small. "The mining company, or another one like it. He said the fight is never over." Kiona stopped his work. He looked at her, his eyes dark and steady in the firelight. "He is right. The world is full of men like Cain. They will always want what is not theirs. They will always try to take—" He put the harness down and moved to sit beside her. He took her hand. It was not the soft, pale hand she had brought from the east. It was a blacksmith's hand. It was scarred and calloused and strong. He traced the lines on her palm with his thumb. "But this is our home, Tala," he said, his voice low. "We are not renters. We have paid for this land, with blood and with faith. They can come. We will be here." She leaned her head against his shoulder, his good shoulder, her wounded one. "They fit, this place," she whispered, looking at the bare adobe walls, at the simple dirt floor. "I never thought. I came west to be alone, to have a place of my own. I thought home was a forge. I thought it was a piece of land." "Kiona." His arm came around her, pulling her close. "Home is not a place. It is not wood or stone." He kissed the top of her head, the scent of her hair, smoke and iron. "Home is here. It is this. It is the person you choose, the person you stand with." She turned her head, and their lips met. It was a kiss of truth, of promises kept. It was a kiss that held the memory of the cold spring and the fire in the depot, and the shared, quiet victory. Outside, the rain fell on the thirsty land. The creek, which had been a whisper, was singing. In the smithy, in the town below, Tala's heavy hammer rested on the anvil, its work done for the day, and in the cabin, leaning against the wall, Kiona's bow rested, its string unbent, the hammer and the bow, the new and the old, side by side. They were not at war. They were in harmony. They had found a new, quiet strength. The valley was safe. The springs were clean. The people, both of them, had found a new beginning. They had learned, the hard way, that freedom was not a piece of land, just as a home was not a building. Freedom was not a thing to be owned. It was a thing you built every day, in the way you chose to treat the world, and the people you shared it with. Thank you so much for listening to our story. I would love to know what you thought. Please comment below and let us all know where in the world you are listening from, so we can all share in the experience. If you enjoyed this tale, please consider subscribing to our channel, Wild West Tales, and giving this video a like. And if you really want to help us out, press that hype button. It tells the world that this story is worth hearing, and it helps get these tales out to more folks. We appreciate your support.